Good morning, everyone.
Madam Chair.
Good morning. Happy Wednesday. I would like to now reconvene the RDI TPA workgroup meeting. As was mentioned yesterday, workgroup members who participate remotely will need to disclose if any other individuals 18 years of age or older are present in the room at the remote location and the general nature of the member's relationship with any such individuals. Are there any disclosures from members attending via Zoom? I see none from Devin, none from Kate, and none from Shayna. Great, thank you. As a reminder, workgroup members who are participating via Zoom must be visible at all times on camera. Please log off Zoom if you need to leave the meeting and log in when you are ready to join the meeting. If you experience any broadband or internet connectivity problems while participating in the meeting, that would be remedied by joining without video. You must announce the reason for your non-appearance when you turn off your camera. This will be particularly important today as we need the individuals on Zoom to complete our quorum. So just please be mindful of that. We will now take roll call. Recording secretary, will you please call the roll?
Hear anything, but I'm here.
Alyssa Brown. Patricia Camarello. Here. Kathy Gracia. Here. Talia Diaz Catano. Rand Duker. Vanessa Escobar. Ursula Estrada Ravelas. Here. Corey Harvey. Here. Colleen Hazeman. Alicia Herrera. Linda Han. Here. Jason Morgan.
Here.
Joshua Nelson.
Here.
Benjamin Odell.
Here.
Mandy Redford.
Here.
Kathleen Rowley.
Sorry, here.
Rebecca Sackett. Tina Sloan. Here. Shayna Sullivan.
Here.
Paula Valdez. Julie Walliner. Here. Matt Wallace. Beverly Young. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Devin, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. I couldn't hear initially. I think there's a pause or a delay once
Okay.
I turn my mic on.
Great. Just want to make sure you're hearing the meeting. Fantastic.
Item 1B is item 1B, day 2 is in session. This is an information item. Would any commission liaisons or staff like to address this group?
Good morning. Great to see you. Have a good day.
Anything, Adam?
No, just, I think today is just continuing the theme of an ample amount of flexibility and grace for this meeting in general. We have people taking care of sick kids. We have people that can be with us or virtual, and just be kind to ourselves, kind to each other. Have a great day.
And of course, Danette.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And I really look forward to the work today. Thank you, Adam, for reminding us about how flexibility is essential. And I just want to encourage everyone today to take care of yourself first, and then let's do the work. Thank you so much.
Pull up the norms so we can have a visual of those. Well,
Got it.
Hold on. Let me.
Right now, hold on, oh, got it.
See my messy desktop.
Excellent. I'm just gonna ask for volunteers just to read the norms for us. So would somebody like to read norm 1?
Be present, be on time and participate, take care of self as needed. We will take regular breaks. Please refrain from checking email and doing other tasks.
Next one.
Give and receive warm and cool feedback respectfully. We critique work and not the person, not the people. Critical analysis is part of the continuous improvement process.
Thank you, Linda. The next one.
Speak truth and seek understanding of truths that differ from yours. Embrace different perspectives. Positive intent.
Next one.
Notice power dynamics. Power shows up in different ways. Be aware of how you might be unconsciously using your privilege and method.
Thank you. And the final one.
Up, step back, be mindful of taking too much or too little things.
Thank you. So as we today, just a reminder, these are the norms that we developed together. That'd be mine. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move to item 2B, right on time. I'm proud of us. The next item is our focus area 2 case studies. So we have invited several different programs to come and present. As you know, we heard from Cal State Sacramento yesterday. Today we will be hearing from our FAST program first, and then at CSU Fresno. And then we're going to hear from UC Santa Barbara National University and the Riverside County Office of Ed. The first UC Santa Barbara uses the Ed TPA, and National and Riverside County both use the Cal TPA. So by the
The audio went out for me. I don't know if it's the same for everyone else online.
keep talking.
Hey, can you hear us now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Great. We were just reviewing that we are going to see 5 presentations. We saw one yesterday with Cal State Sacramento, and today we're going to be hearing from Fresno, UC Santa Barbara, National University, and Riverside County. The goal was to be able to hear from each of the different TPA types, and from a diverse type of university program. As well as County Office of Ed intern programs. So how are these different programs embedding? And hopefully that'll help us understand how the TPA is being embedded across different platforms. And so with that, we have, yes.
So I just wanted to share a couple of structures for the note-taking sessions or the presentations. Everybody should have a note-taking guide. And well, what you see here are the 3 questions that presenters were asked to prepare presentations with. And so they will generally follow that, but they also have as much license to share whatever else they want to as well. And so you have another notes section. And so this is just to help you kind of track the information across the presentations. If you so choose, you can also use the little notebook that we've included in your binder. And so that is there. Each presentation will have 20 to 30 minutes to present, to share those ideas. And then there will be a time, much like yesterday, there'll be a time for a question and answer. And so just sort of, so you know that's coming, that's going to be the flow of these presentations, 20 to 30 minutes, time for conversation and questions. We're going to do our best to stick close to this and see how well we can do.
Fantastic. All right, with that, I would like to invite the presenters for our CSU Fresno Fast. Please, come on up. Thank you. We appreciate you being here today.
Oh, pleasure. All right. So good morning, everyone. I am gonna go ahead and share my screen. Do this properly. Okay, and put that into slideshow. Okay, everybody see that on my video? Okay, and can everyone hear me okay, both in Zoom and excellent. So good morning, everybody. We are from Fresno State with the Fresno Assessment of Student Teachers. And I'm really excited to be joined by some of my colleagues here this morning. We have Monica Billen. Monica, you can't. There she is, who's an associate professor of literacy education, Dr. Christina Rios, who's an assistant professor of special education, and Dr. Nadia Hoover, who's an assistant professor of bilingual bicultural education. And I have Susie's name on there as well. You heard from Susie last time. She is at 6th grade camp with her daughter, so unavailable to present today. Just to give a quick reminder about FAST. I know we heard last time more specifically, but this is just an overview of what is currently being worked on for the multiple subject and ed specialist. We have a pilot version happening right now with the multiple subject. We have a pilot version of the ed specialist that we're hoping to bring to the commission in December for approval to pilot that. Both of those in the revised site visitation project, it's aligned with TPE 7. Candidates do a whole class literacy assessment. They group their students. They plan 3 mini lessons that are responsive to their students' learning needs that address literacy foundations and meaning making. We have 3 rubrics that assess that planning, implementation, reflection. The teaching sample project looks largely like what it did in the past. Candidates plan a 5-lesson unit that addresses it's specifically in math and literacy. It used to be any content area and literacy. 7 tasks and with rubrics that are aligned, students in context, learning outcomes, assessment plan designed for instruction, instructional decision-making, analysis of student learning, and reflection and self-evaluation. The single subject, that has remained unchanged. The teaching sample project looks pretty much the same as the multiple subject and ed specialist versions. For the site visitation project, the candidates gather data about their students, plan a lesson for small group or whole class, teach and record their lesson, reflect on their instruction. 3 rubrics, again, it's basically 3 parts, 3 rubrics, planning, implementation, reflection. Okay. Just wanted to give you that reminder. So what I wanted to start off with is just talking about how FAST is really embedded within the Fresno State teacher education culture. It was developed by faculty in the early 2000s, and there's just this expectation that faculty will be involved with. Faculty are continually invited to be calibrated, to score, to think about how to integrate FAST into their instruction. All coaches in our program, and coaches is, I think, as most people know, how we refer to our university supervisors, they are expected to score. As you'll hear more during our presentation, they kind of guide candidates through this process. And I'll just add that having the FAST is really a source of pride for our teacher education program. So the first thing I want to highlight is how faculty are involved in the design process for the FAST. As I said in the very beginning, this was faculty driven, and it continues to remain in the hands of faculty. And I'm going to turn it over to Monica to talk about that.
Hello and good morning. Can I have a sound check? Can everyone? Okay, great. Sounds like you can hear me. Hello, I am Monica Billen. Thank you so much, Juliet, for that information. So some of you that are here in this room remember a group of us faculty got together and we actually spent many hours in this room. So I added this picture here today to give you a little visual of what we were up to. We were in this room for many, many hours, and we were talking with one another. We were reviewing research. We were reviewing state standards, and we spent a lot of time together discussing and also changing our assessment at Fresno State. So if we can go to the next slide, we also had a lot of time writing different things up on the board and erasing and shifting things. And and really trying to make this assessment what we wanted it to look like. So also going on to the next slide, Juliet, thank you. So in this process, when we got together, we had a lot of different things that we reviewed. We reviewed the performance assessment design standards. We really dug into TPA 7. And of course, we also reviewed relevant research in these areas in literacy. So, and then some other things we considered as well. We also considered our own philosophical views and stances in literacy. We also considered the current Fresno State assessment. And then we also reviewed and considered the RECA exam that was going away. And then, of course, we also wanted to consider our own candidates' lives and their backgrounds and think about them in this process as well. And then we spent hours and hours determining how, with all of these different pieces, we could meet all of these different needs and actually create something that was manageable and something we could actually create, and then something that our students could actually do. So then again, Juliet already covered this, but just a little bit about our SVP, that stands for Site Visitation Project. A little bit about this process, and you can see that this is kind of similar to the whiteboard that you saw in a previous photo. And these are the steps that we came up with after hours and hours of working together. So first, we give an assessment to our whole group, or our candidates give an assessment to their entire class of children. So the first thing that they do is they're giving an entire spelling inventory to their class. From that spelling inventory, they are creating several different groups based on the needs of their students. After they create several different groups, they pick one group to really focus in on. So you can see that step 3 on our steps here. So then they focus in on one focal group that they have determined has a very specific need, and they all have a very similar need. And then in this group, they also identify an emergent bilingual or a special education student. From there, then they create a plan for this focal group. So again, we're starting at whole group, but then we're identifying a small group. Then they create a plan for this group of students. And then they create 3 lesson plans. And then they also create 3 lessons. They record those 3 lessons. And then after that, then of course they reflect on that process, and they reflect on that literacy instruction that they gave that small group of students. So at the end of our time together, that is what we created, this SVP with several different steps.
Thanks, Monica. So then as I shared, we also have just gone through the process to revise our education specialist FAST to also align with the literacy TPEs and the assessment design standards for the literacy. So Christy will talk about that.
Yeah, so the education specialist faculty collaborated to discuss updates for the literacy redesign, ensuring that our program meets the needs of diverse student populations, right, including our kiddos with disabilities. So in our meetings, we closely examined the FAST 3.0 assessment for multiple subject candidates, evaluating its alignment with literacy competencies for education specialist candidates. Excuse me. So we reviewed the performance assessment design standards to ensure they address the skills and competencies required for education specialists, particularly in the areas of mild mod to extensive support needs, because those are the 2 credentials that Fresno State currently offers under education specialist. We made specific revisions to the curriculum in light of TPE 7, which focuses on literacy instruction and assessment to better support needs with mild to moderate and extensive support needs. So for extensive support needs, our redesign shifts the approach to assessment, focusing on flexible, meaningful evaluations tailored to each student's capabilities and goals. Additionally, we emphasized shifting foundational literacy skills, ensuring that instruction for students with extensive support needs includes core literacy elements in a way that is accessible and relevant, right? When we're thinking about our kiddos who have more severe disabilities. So for example, we embedded the All Children Can Read literacy skills checklist. So this allows opportunities for all children to develop and improve their literacy skills. So these are just a few points that I wanted to highlight, the collaboration, assessment tools, and strategic changes made to support diverse learning needs within the education specialist program.
Thanks, Christy. And so I think what we really want to highlight by having Monica and Christy tell these stories is that when faculty are involved in this process, then when they're teaching their courses, they are just very intimately familiar with what candidates are being asked to do and how to prepare the candidates for those tasks. And so then that allows them to really skillfully embed preparation for the assessments in the coursework. So we have been purposeful in thinking about how we sequence courses. I will say this is in a little bit of flux right now. Those of you who work in university settings know that shifting program plans can be a little challenging with university bureaucracy. In our older version of the FAST, because for multiple subjects, they focused on math and literacy in the site visitation project, we made sure that their math methods course aligned with the semester that they were working on that. Now math is shifting to the teaching sample project, so we're trying to do some shifting with that math methods course to the final phase. However, in phase 1 of the multiple subject and the education specialist, candidates do take a course on developmentally appropriate practices and literacy foundations, so that really lines them up to do that SVP in phase 2. And then, of course, as I kind of have tried to highlight already, faculty, having that schema of the FAST in mind, are able to create assignments related to the FAST tasks and just think about, also just help candidates explicitly see the connections between their coursework and the tasks. And so again, Monica's going to share some more specifics about that.
Yes, thank you, Juliet. So as a teacher educator, one of my main goals is to be able to model effective instruction and assessment for my teacher candidates so that then, of course, when they go to work with children, that they are using effective instruction and also assessment. So with this assessment that we're talking about here today, one of the main goals is for us to model for our teacher candidates assessments that are a good worth of time for them to potentially use in their classroom as well. So go ahead and moving on. So I teach the Literacy Foundations course in our multiple subject program. And some things that I was already doing in my class, I'm teaching them literacy content. I'm also teaching them literacy assessments. And then I'm teaching them practical strategies to align with the literacy content and the literacy assessments. And then, of course, we are always constantly reflecting on our strategies and our assessments and the growth of our students. So then, of course, this perfectly aligns with the assessment that I was discussing earlier, where candidates are giving literacy assessments. They, of course, have to learn about the literacy assessments prior. Then they are planning instruction based on that assessment data. And then they are teaching literacy instruction based on that assessment data. And then at the end, reflecting on instruction. So this was stuff I was already doing in my class, teaching literacy content, and then they are practicing literacy content with children, and then we're reflecting on that process. And that is the exact process that they're going through in the assessment.
Monica, did you want to talk about?
Yeah, we also just, throughout the process have thought through and talked through different complications or different issues. And one of the things that we are discussing and talking through right now is because of the alignment of our assessment with our coursework, you get yourself into a situation where you are assessing them as you are teaching and they are learning the material. So, and that's one question that we've discussed and we're continuing to discuss as a team to better understand this process of if it is good to be assessing them while they are learning the information. So that's one question that we have and a puzzle that we're continuing to figure out.
Yeah. Okay, so as I kind of alluded to in the beginning, FAST is also really embedded within our clinical practice. And there's multiple ways it's embedded within clinical practice. From the very beginning, we use the TK20 data management system. That's used throughout the clinical practice experience. That's where our candidates upload their lesson plans for their coaches. That's where they receive feedback. That's where they submit their reflections. That's also the same system that we use for FAST submission. So it's a system that they're already really familiar with. Also, we ask our candidates for all of their lessons where their coaches are observing them, to video record those so that they just get used to having those video recordings, going through that process. We actually encourage them to video record themselves as often as possible. It's such a useful tool for reflection, but for sure, we require that for those coach visits. And again, uploading it to TK20 just makes them very familiar with that. Both the TSP and the SVP are implemented in the final weeks of that phase of clinical practice to ensure that they're able to really know their context, plan instruction that's meaningful to their context. As I've shared, faculty and coaches score both the TSP and the SVP. The SVP scores are used to then identify areas to support the candidates in their final phase of clinical practice. I have a slide on this at the end. I think we could do a better job of making sure the coaches that they're getting handed off to have those scores so that they can target their feedback and support. Scores are provided to the candidates immediately or within like a week or two, which allows them to implement the feedback that they receive and identify goals for their future teaching practices. Also important to note is that candidates cannot pass the clinical practice without passing their teaching performance assessment. So it's very much tied. It's like the final piece that they have to do successfully in order to pass that clinical practice course. And so Nadia, who is now an assistant professor of bilingual bicultural education, this is her first year in that role, but for a long time, she has been a coach in our program. And so I wanted her to be able to share with you some of what this looks like from a coach's perspective.
Thank you, Juliet, and good morning all. So through the coaching, the clinical practice, what we do, or what I used to do as a supervisor, university supervisor or coach, my role was to make that connection of how practice is in the field and how the FAST is embedded in, throughout those coaching cycles. So the students went through about 6 coaching cycles. Again, 6 lessons are required during the semester. And our job was to provide guidance and specific feedback on lesson planning that was in alignment with different components, such as, Common Core standards, ELD standards, lesson objectives, activities, and assessment. Coaches supervise and observe the lessons, provided feedback that was aligned with TPEs. And again, as it was mentioned previously, the students were required to at least go through this coaching cycle 3 times. That way they receive feedback, they receive guidance in how to prepare those lessons and implement them, and for them to receive that guidance for their assessment. So the lesson debrief, so again, those coaching cycles, the lesson debriefs consisted on, scheduling a time to discuss my observations as a coach. And I guided them through those conversations through coaching questions, which the intent is for our candidates to make those connections with evidence. Why was this lesson successful? Why was this lesson maybe not as successful as they wanted? And based on student behavior, based on their own practice and during that lesson. During that debrief too, the candidate was able to identify their strengths, the areas of growth, and also set goals for the following lesson. And the university supervisor was also referring or referred to certain points on the SVP or TSV, depending on the phase they were in, and that were related to the specific area of the lesson that we were addressing. Also, during this coaching cycle, the candidate had the opportunity to reflect and commit to adjusting their instruction for the next lesson, in addition to the university supervisor providing that opportunity to make those connections and to make the connections also with their courses, what they were learning in different courses, literacy, math, depending on the assessment, SVP or TSP. And, you know, that was the time for us as coaches to be able to help them reflect on how to make those statements, how to come up with that information that, again, could be used as a practice for, you know, completing their reflection piece on both of the projects. And also throughout those coaching cycles, us university coaches ensure that candidates make those connections to the different sections of the FAST. So importance of knowing your students, being able to plan that lesson and make decisions on instruction and all of that. So again, this is just a brief you know, overview of what we coaches provide you know, for our students during the clinical practice.
Thank you, Nadia. Sure. And then the last piece I wanted to highlight is the way that we use the FAST results to support our own program improvement. We talked briefly when Susie was here about our annual Teacher Education Summit, which is attended by faculty, coaches, mentor teachers, site and district partners. At that day, we basically pass out a folder to each participant that has just a lot of data on our programs, and the FAST scores are one piece of data that we include. We ask them to analyze that data and then talk in various group settings about areas of strength they see in our programs and areas for growth. One way we've been working to kind of dig a bit deeper into that FAST data is, in the past, all that has been collected is the overall score for each rubric, which, okay, that's great. We see lots of candidates get a 2 or a 3 on this rubric score, but it doesn't really dig into where on that specific task they might be having some challenges. So we've worked to create a system, it's not perfect, again, in development, where we ask coaches to give, coaches and faculty, whoever's scoring, to give the score by band in the rubric, so that we can get some more precise data. Still provide the overall score for that rubric, because that's what's used to determine if it passes or not, but help us just dig in a little bit deeper. We are working on having more regular teacher education retreats, again, attended by all faculty and coaches, where we're analyzing the FAST scores for specific areas for program improvement. So faculty can think about things that they can do in their courses to better support candidates, and coaches can think about ways that they might better support candidates in their clinical practice. And then Fresno State is also part of AQUEP, the Association for Advancing Quality in Educator Preparation, which is a national accrediting body. And the AQUEP structure of accreditation is very much guided by a continuous improvement framework. So with AQUEP, you're given standards, you're asked to identify data that you as a program are going to analyze to determine where you are in meeting those standards. You do that on a very large scale at the time of the site visit, but then you have annual reports to submit. And so we have used our FAST data to help with that process. Each year we're looking for we select key rubrics from the FAST that align with those AQUEP standards, analyze that, use that to set some goals for the following year. And then lastly, our areas to polish. And I just want to give a little shout out that this idea of polishing comes from when I was a credential candidate and my university supervisor would talk about my keepers and polishers. So I like that language. So our areas to polish. We need to involve more faculty in scoring. Again, In the beginning, this was very much faculty driven. As new faculty have come on board, they have not engaged as much in the process. So it has really fallen to our coaches more than the faculty. So we're looking for ways to try and bring more faculty in. We need to provide more feedback to our candidates. Right now, they get a score and they don't really get any kind of qualitative feedback. That can be particularly challenging if they haven't passed an area and they do have to revise. What happens now is everybody who has an area that they didn't pass, Susie holds a meeting to talk with them about what they might do. Coaches also step in to help out, but it would be helpful if the person who was actually doing the assessing provided some feedback. Of course, that's labor intensive and kinds of challenges with that, but we're working on it. And then again, as I said earlier, being more purposeful in ensuring that the next phase coaches have those SVP scores so they know areas to target coaches in their final phase. And I'm sure I could come up with more, but that's what we have. So any questions I can answer for you? Sharing.
Latricia?
Just a few, like, I guess, questions. So for each coach that you have, how many candidates?
It really varies from coach to coach. Some just
are the coaches?
Some are, most are part-time. Most of our coaches are retired educators who are taking on however many they want. We have actually done some work in recent years to try and limit how many candidates they take on to ensure they have the time to really properly support them.
And this is my next question, which is meeting expectations. When they're working with their coaches, are they meeting like once or twice a week, or how often?
So the coaches are required to do 6 observations with them over the course of the semester. They also do a beginning and end of semester triad meeting with their mentor teachers, but a lot of times there's additional in between conversations that are happening. Our candidates also get support for the multiple subject program within what's called an inquiry/puzzles of practice course, which is really focusing on collecting data and thinking about your practice. And then at the single subject level, they do have a seminar that accompanies each phase. And so I can talk a little bit about that. I'm actually teaching that course right now, and we're talking, and it's for all of our single subject candidates in their first phase, talking really specifically about, all right, at this point, you all should have gathered your data on your students in context. What are you doing to gather that data? Where can you find this information? Then how do you use that information to support you with your lesson planning?
My last question is just teacher education retreats. And I mean, best in your experience, what do you think would be a good number to kind of like, hey, we need to have one a year?
3 a semester would be my dream. And I would like everybody to show up. That would be my dream. We're working on it.
Well, follow up to that, what would be the bare minimum that would be effective?
I mean,
the semester.
It's a semester. But yeah, but it's challenging because as many of you working at CSUs know, the vast majority of our teacher ed courses are taught by adjunct faculty. A lot of them are teachers in their own classrooms. And so then getting them to come to the university at another time, scheduling it at a time when they can make it, when our faculty will come, it's just really challenging. And what ends up happening is it's Friday afternoon, right? Like 4 to 6. And who wants to go to a meeting on Friday afternoon from 4 to 6? So trying to think about ways to incentivize it. Of course, we have no money to incentivize it. So there's that challenge as well.
Jason?
Y'all mentioned that you're trying to figure out if it's a good idea to assist them while they're learning the content. Let's talk about what are the assess, not assist. What are the challenges that you're seeing with trying to do that at the same or concurrently?
Monica, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I can hop in there. So as I think probably a lot of you can remember, when you are in a teacher education program and it's all very overwhelming, there's a lot of content. There is a lot of stress associated with being in front of children, having your coaches come in and watch you. They're experiencing a lot of new information and a lot of stress. And when we are assessing them at the same time that they are learning the content. They don't have a lot of time to sit down and let the information marinate and reflect on the information. It's kind of like boom, boom, boom. You learn the information, you're assessed on the information. And I don't know that we need to go into this, but we have a 2-semester program and we also have a 3-semester program. And so it also does look a little bit differently across a few different programs in our credential program. And so we're still trying to figure that out. But I would say to answer your question, the major issue that we have is that they are learning a lot of new information and being assessed on that. And they are not given the time and space necessarily to really let it marinate and sit and we also, as instructors, run into the question of, okay, if we are assessing them in the same semester that they are learning the information, at what point can we give them help and at what point can we not? And can we, if we're not giving them help, how can that actually be an assessment if we haven't taught them? So we've really kind of struggled with that, and as we're piloting the program right now, we're being reflective about that and having conversations about that, and finding the best way to instruct them, but then also have, a high stakes assessment that they need to pass. So I don't know if that answered your question, and I can't see actually who asked it, but.
He gave you a thumbs up.
Okay.
Tina?
Yeah, could you talk about the, different programs have different structures for how they create their clinical practice and how that's integrated with coursework or when coursework happens, when clinical practice happens. Could you talk about what's necessary to do this assessment at FAST? In other words, what kinds of clinical structures would not work for your assessment versus what would be the ideal?
That's a great question. Trying to think about what I think. One thing that I think is really critical for ours, like I shared, that they complete this during the clinical practice. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. So trying to do this outside of that semester, I think would be really challenging. I think a clinical practice course that didn't align with when they were taking the courses, that would also make it really challenging. So if they were taking courses one semester, I don't know, if they were doing all the coursework and then the next semester they're just focusing on the clinical practice, I think that would make it a little bit more challenging in terms of being able to get the appropriate support. Yeah, I think that's the best I could come up with. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I just had one thing to add, if I can. This semester, as we have been piloting the program, we have found that it is really important to have coaches that are not overworked. When they have fewer, and it kind of just makes sense, right? When they have fewer candidates, they are able to adjust their schedule and come to the observations when they need to come. I had an issue just yesterday where they wanted to teach their SVP lesson on a certain day, and their coach needed to be there, but their coach couldn't come because they had other obligations and other candidates that they needed to observe. And so when we have our assessment embedded in our program, it requires that we have faculty on board and we also have our coaches on board, and that we're all able to do the things that we need to do. Because if we don't, they can't finish their high stakes assessment and they can't finish the semester. So, so to answer your question, we have to have coaches and faculty and our candidates. And then to make that even more complicated, we also have to have our mentor teachers all on board to help make this happen. And again, if we can't work it out, they can't complete their high stakes assessment. in order to move on to the next semester. So it really has to be a situation where we can work as a team with those different parties, faculty, coaches, our students, and then our mentor teachers.
Ben?
So I think my question really comes down to timing. So obviously this is happening throughout the year and I recognize the embedded nature of it. Do you, in the FAST, is it appropriate to say certain things are submitted throughout the course? Is it chunked? Or is everything kind of at one time? Because I saw obviously the site visitation project and whatnot is last 2 weeks that I saw that. Is it kind of chunked throughout the course of the program or no?
So in an informal way, yes.
Yes.
So they have a deadline when everything has to be submitted. But one of the things we've recognized is that, you know, candidates were waiting to do it. So Susie really thought about, okay, what are deadlines that we could give them throughout the semester to make sure they're working on the pieces and having adequate time. And so she kind of just created these suggested due dates for the different tasks. But it's not like, okay, the, you know, students in context pieces or the planning documents are due here. The whole thing gets submitted at the end.
So everything's scored at once.
Yeah, everything is scored at once.
Hey, Matt?
My question might go out of bounds, so feel free to say I'm out of bounds and talk to you later. I'm wondering where candidates can demonstrate how they're attending to equity and how that might be assessed.
It's something we've actually talked about. I don't know that we do a fantastic job with that. I'm looking at the screen to see if Monica, Nadia, Christy have anything to add, but yeah, Nadia.
That's a great question. Actually, came up in one of my my meetings with some community members. So, again, through the lens of a coach, that's what we observe. When my students are calling on certain students only, or having that particular student speak all the time, not just one lesson, but okay, second lesson, the same thing is happening. That's when we discuss, how are you? Let's go and look at this point from this time in your recording, from this time to this time. Let's look and see, how many students answer, how many students engage in the conversation with you. And we identify that, it's just one or two. And again, the next lesson is the same. So this is where we discuss areas of why is this happening? The students in the Valley, it is diverse and we are promoting it, but I don't think, again, through information and coursework, I think we could do a better job in addressing that area. As a coach, I was able to pinpoint it, but it is not, I think we can emphasize it a little bit more in having some key components in our coursework to address that particular area. So, and again, that was just my own experience. I'm not sure if all the coaches are actually also looking for that. And a lot of it is they have, as it was mentioned, many students that they are coaching or candidates that they are coaching, and it is hard to be fully there as a coach and observing all this specific area. So I know the SVP and the TSP, we have focused students, but how about the other students who are not focused students, who are not quite chiming in when instruction is happening?
I don't think it's explicitly addressed within the FAST.
Yeah.
But I think we did do work in the revisions of the SVP to try and attend to that more. There's this lesson planning table, we did bring it into the rubric as well, right? About who, as they're gathering information about their students, we're asking them to think about who are their students as individuals, and what are their cultural backgrounds. And then we ask them to ensure that their instruction is aligned in specific way with their students' cultural backgrounds.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Julia, that was one major issue or complaint that we had about our previous FAST is we saw an absence, and that was one thing that we really wanted to try to improve this time. Like my colleagues have said, I don't think that we are there quite yet, but one thing that we have been focusing on with our candidates, and I'm piloting it right now. So one thing that we've been just talking about, and that's part of our rubric, like Julia brought up, and part of their lesson planning, is they are focusing on culturally sustaining pedagogy, and as they are bringing in texts to their lessons, they are specifically focusing on texts where their students can see themselves. And we are talking about comprehension around culturally sustaining pedagogy. And our candidates are really thinking more deeply about culturally sustaining pedagogy when they are actually being asked to find texts and find comprehension activities that really help the children be seen and be a part of the classroom. So, and that is a very heavy part of in our SVP. We have two major sections. We have foundational skills, and then we have meaning making. And that meaning making portion, a heavy part of that is culturally sustaining pedagogy and finding culturally sustaining texts. And we've labeled that as identity reading, helping our candidates find texts that we're referring to as identity reading, where children can see themselves in the text.
And to add on to that, I think we're doing a really good job with the student side, right? But I think going back to like the faculty and coach summits, I think that's where we are an area for improvement where we could really target that for our coaches and faculty to be more pivy and have like keep an eye out for that as well. So.
So first, I want to commend to you guys. I mean, it's wonderful. You guys, I think everything we've talked about, like improvement, I feel like you guys are already there doing it. But so why aren't other institutes doing this? We talked about how it's, it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's, you're looking at like reliability, validity concerns, and aggregating the data to make sure there's no biases with, gaps in who's passing, who's not passing, students of color. Like, how are you addressing all of that and being able to maintain this whole process? Sorry, it's a loaded question.
So how are we addressing all of that, or how? So I mean, why aren't other institutions doing that? Because it's a ton of work and it does require a big investment. Susie has release time, not enough, in my opinion, to do the work that we ask her to do in terms of, keeping the show running each semester, making sure all candidates are doing the version that they need to do, calibrating the coaches, bringing people together for the scoring, collecting that data. We have a faculty member who runs the statistical analyses. She's also, when Susie assigns projects, she's making sure that we do have those double scorings happening so that we can test for the reliability. So I'm guessing that's why other institutions aren't doing this. But yeah, I guess it's in terms of how we're making it all happen. As I said, having the Susie to kind of do that, having the other faculty, I kind of oversee the processes, like when we have to do these revisions, guiding that process, making sure we have all the documentation we need to submit to the commission ready, working with commission staff to get our versions through for approval.
And are you seeing gaps in who's passing, who's not passing? Is that when you disaggregate them?
We do see some, and it's an area that we need to work on more. Honestly, just being in this space and thinking about it more, I think it's probably the writing piece. We have not explored allowing candidates to have those other options for the commentary piece. And I think that's a place that we need to go. So allow them to video record those reflections or audio record. So, yeah. And in fact, actually, with Susie was pulling everything together for the last meeting, she was like, oh, gosh, I have not dug into this enough. This is concerning. We need to address this. So,
Oh, Vanessa.
I was gonna ask what your candidates are saying at the end of it and how it impacts their instruction.
So we have done, I've done some small studies, and I actually had that data to share with you all. Never mind. And so surveying them, done some surveys of them right at the point of completion, and then also trying to reach out to candidates who are like into the field. And when we've talked with candidates who are in the field, they say, actually, what we are asked to do does replicate what we're asked to do as teachers. Trying to, and I can pull up that data more if I look for it. Anecdotally, I mean, they feel like it's a lot. They feel like it's high stress. But when I hear the stories of what other candidates have to go through, and I think, I mean, anytime any of us are, tasked with something, we're going to think it's high stress. But I think compared with some of the others, I don't think it's as intense. I will share, just in Linda, some of what you shared about those struggles with the submission. If one of our candidates is getting to that midnight deadline and has a technical problem, they reach out to their coach, who reaches out to Susie, and they turn it in the next day. It's not like, oh, that's it. That's your one shot. So I feel like our approach is much more humane.
Any other questions?
Oh, Tina? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if there were no state requirements, legislative requirement, age and a performance assessment that meets all the qualities that 44320 says, how would your program be different than it is now? What would you not be doing?
We not be doing. So given our current financial situation and given the cost, I don't know that we would go do the whole process of the FAST. I don't know that there would be significant changes to, I think that there would be faculty who would want to do it for sure. If it wasn't a requirement, I could see that being seen as an area to cut.
Areas. I mean, you mentioned earlier that this particular model requires a ton of advising. I think that was a direct, I thought it was advising.
If it's advising,
okay, I may have misread.
Yeah.
But so when you talk about the whole of it, where do you think the most costly? And I guess what I'm asking you to do in the moment, it doesn't have to be this moment. We can let this come back. The cost benefit analysis here in terms of your job.
Yeah. And I'd love for Monica and Nadia and Christy to jump in on this too. I definitely think the benefit is there. I think it's really beneficial for our candidates to go through this process I feel like the FAST provides the structure for the kind of thinking that we want our candidates to do once they're in the field, and makes those processes explicit so that they can begin to internalize that thinking and take it with them. So I think for the cost of Susie, I think the real cost is Susie. Would you all agree? You don't have as big of a
full-time coordinator.
She's not full-time, actually. She should be. She is half-time right now. So it's her release time. Yeah. In terms of what would look different, oh, sorry, Nadia, I saw your hand up.
I think in being a former K-8 teacher and coach and administrator, the assessment truly mimics what is required at the school site or as a teacher. go through the different phases. In terms of what could be take out or pulled out, I feel that we go through the 6 lessons, the 6 coaching sessions. In terms of the coaches, maybe putting it instead of 6 lessons, going to 4 and really structuring what that coaching cycle looks like and providing feedback from, again, lesson planning and coming and talking about how could the lesson that is going to be written be approached. I think emphasizing that, but again, that practice, those 6 lessons truly give our candidates that practice to be ready to complete the assessment. And I feel that we are in a great spot at Fresno State because our students are able to see how it looks like. Everyone is chiming in, everyone is collaborating. I know there maybe more collaboration could be embedded between faculty and coaches to ensure that coursework we know as coaches, okay, the students are going through these courses. The student, this is the requirement from this class. How can I make that connection? I think that could be improved as always, including more mentors that are that are top of the, really they know their craft and they are a good model for our students will be amazing. But we go back to mentors not willing to give time, to be taking that role because it takes time out of their duties. So I think as overall, our program is truly provides our students with that experience, and taking out something will be difficult because the students will not have that practice.
All right, I'm going to call on Kathy and then we need to move to our next presentation.
I just wanted to say that, Mary, you bring up a really good point in asking if this was not required, would it be done? Because again, I think that when we think about, we can take the high stakes portion of it out. And if we can truly kind of move this into a continuum, like an induction or whatever, over a course of time, within the law, of course, because that's kind of the thing we're going to come up against in terms of, having something. But if we can move it, I do think that there's a space for it in accreditation, in really helping and guiding programs in actually embedding it and actually doing it without it necessarily being a high stakes. Just an idea.
All right. So with that, thank you to all of the members of the Fresno State faculty who came to join us today. We appreciate your time. Thank you, Julia.
Everybody.
Thank you.
So I would like for us to now have our members from UC Santa Barbara come up. I think it's our very own Tori. We are delighted to have Tori Harvey come up. Let's give her just a few minutes to get set up and then we'll begin. Welcome Tori Harvey from UC Santa Barbara to share about how they embed the Ed TPA into their program. You're welcome and thank you for being here. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Unfortunately, I don't have other colleagues sharing with me today, but I did solicit a lot of their input. Well, actually, all of their input I solicited via email, and so I'll be sharing quotes from them as well as we go. I thought it might be helpful to provide a little bit of program context in advance. You credential about 75 to 90 candidates a year. We are a one-year program where we use a residency model. We have a singular pathway. We don't have an intern credential or other pathways. The one-year MED and teaching credential combined is important because some of the candidate work in the MED has the potential to inform their work in the Ed TPA. We offer 4 types of credentials. And we have really close partnerships with our LEAs. So we're in 4 districts, 2 charter schools, 1 county, and we're in TK through 22 placements. So we also place our extensive support needs candidates in adult transition programs. And then the EdTPA handbooks that we use, and this will be a big program shift for us this year with the new literacy assessment for our elementary candidates, is elementary mathematics with literacy task 4, and then each of the other handbooks for the other credential areas. I want to start with just sharing that our program culture is very much one of continuous improvement, and I'm fortunate to have had predecessors in the director position who have helped establish that culture for us. Like Dr. Lynn was talking about yesterday, part of this culture was established through PACT. So we had PACT, which was the performance assessment for California teachers. It was locally scored, but equally important, we were locally calibrated. So our faculty each year was calibrating with each other around rubrics and developing shared understandings of candidate practice. When we transitioned from PACT to EdTPA, again, our faculty had an opportunity to calibrate together on EdTPA. So we were part of the pilot. So it really required a deep understanding from our faculty of what the rubrics meant and what the tasks were requiring of our candidates. And we engage in a lot of work in quarterly faculty retreats. So we have faculty retreats 3 times a year. Our course instructors and supervisors, we consider them all faculty. And then we also invite our partners, but as Juliet mentioned, it's hard for practicing teachers to come to faculty retreats during the day. Although we do have one local principal who pretty consistently participates. And in these retreats, we look at some quantitative data, but also dig into some qualitative data with our candidate work. That's changed over time as we moved away from PACT and into EdTPA. And so now that qualitative inquiry is more in supervisor meetings and faculty meetings in each of our programs. So our multiple subjects program oftentimes invites supervisors to bring in problems of practice that they look at together. Our secondary program, most recently, supervisors have asked to dig into candidate work on we have a new unit design frame that I'll talk about in a little bit for our candidates to plan units with. And they want to look at what our candidates are actually doing with that work and how they're taking that up. And then finally, part of this culture is that all of our faculty is intimately involved in supporting candidates. A lot of our supervisors are also instructors, and some of our instructors are cooperating teachers. So there's a very tight integration between coursework and field work for us. Our candidates are in placements from the start of school in August to the end of school in June. Our program pass rates, last year we had a 94% first-time pass rate. I know there's been questions around error codes, so I just wanted to include we had 2 students with error codes. One was due to untranslated materials, and another was due to an unscorable planning task. And that was a particular candidate who we had encouraged to gain extra practice prior to getting the EdTPA, but they were resistant to that. And then our scores track with what we're seeing in the rest of the data, which is that our math and world language candidates tend to have the most challenging time with passing EdTPA. And so we were able to apply the secondary passing standard for 3 of our math candidates and 1 of our world languages candidates. In 22-23, we had a 95% first-time pass rate, no error codes, and there was no secondary passing standard. So I was asked to talk about embedded opportunities in both coursework and clinical practice. And because our coursework and clinical practice are so tightly integrated, I think really the main difference is that our coursework oftentimes introduces a lot of the skills and understandings that candidates need to be successful on EdTPA and also successful as teachers. And then the clinical practice is where they're practicing those, and then they're assessed on them both in their coursework and in clinical practice. We have a lot of elements that span coursework and clinical practice. I mentioned our lesson design frame. So we have, each of our programs has their own lesson planning template that they use across all courses, across all clinical practice. And this is a very iterative template that gets tweaked and redesigned pretty much every year based on what we're seeing both our candidates do with it and also what we're hearing from our partners. So we solicit partner feedback and involvement in bi-yearly structured meetings, but also informally through our supervisors, and use that to inform the work. Our candidates also have structured reflections that they're doing in coursework and in clinical practice that are very similar to each other. The TPE alignment is across coursework and clinical practice, and then they're assessed and also offered feedback across those two experiences. So EdTPA is embedded in multiple places in coursework. I know this is a dense slide. These are some of the courses that we have in which EdTPA is embedded. Our exceptional learners course, so this is for our general ed, multiple subject and secondary candidates to learn about students with disabilities and special needs. And that course prepares candidates to address these particular rubrics through principles of universal design and also through understanding needs and accommodations for exceptional learners. The context for learning piece in EdTPA is explicitly addressed in that course. Our ELD SEDI course teaches our candidates about functions and forms, which EdTPA calls syntax and vocabulary, and also discourse. We address receptive and productive language demands that students might experience, and then also prepare our candidates with supports. Content methods. Each content area talks about subject-specific pedagogy, which is rubric 9, and then also subject-specific methods for planning, assessing student learning, and engaging and deepening student learning as well, which are indicated by those rubric numbers. Our ELA methods course is where the bulk of, I mentioned we do the EdTPA math with literacy task 4. The bulk of literacy task 4 is addressed in our fall ELA methods course for multiple subject candidates, where the candidates are learning to teach a literacy strategy and related skills, and then also assess student learning, analyze student learning, and plan to re-engage students. Our supervision groups are specific to fieldwork contexts. So candidates meet with a supervisor who's supervising other candidates at that school site. They talk about pedagogy specific to the students in those classrooms that they're serving. So for instance, all of our candidates in the bilingual authorization program meet together to talk about pedagogy and ways to address student needs. And then finally, our instructional design course runs throughout our fall and winter quarters, and that's very targeted support for completing EdTPA. I'll jump into that. Am I talking too fast? Okay, so each task of EdTPA has explicit support for candidates across these courses. So the context, as I mentioned, is embedded in various courses. So candidates are looking at the needs of their learners through lenses of supports that students might need. So through literacy supports, through supports for disabilities, through language supports. Our multiple subject and our ed specialist candidates do a comprehension literacy segment. This has been embedded in our program since before the EdTPA, where our candidates are using, they're planning a literacy instruction sequence, and then they're also addressing their thinking and their reflections on their planning using specific planning commentary prompts from Ed TPA, and then being given feedback on some of the Ed TPA rubrics that are related to those. And then they also use the planning template from the Literacy Task Force to do the planning for that. So they become familiar with that part of that task. Our candidates also, as they're doing unit and lesson planning for solo teaching, are receiving feedback from our instructors, supervisors, and cooperating teachers. And that feedback on their planning is focused on the progression of learning tasks and the alignment between objectives, learning tasks, and assessment. And those are also related to Ed TPA rubrics, that rubrics 1 and 5 in the planning tasks. And then finally, our Ed specialists are using a systematic instruction plan that grounds their planning in student data. And the systematic instruction plan is something we've been, similar to our unit design frame, is something we've been adapting over time as we're seeing what candidates do with it and how they're using it to support students in classrooms. To prepare candidates for task 2, which is the instruction task, all candidates are observed prior to doing the Ed TPA. So typically in fall quarter, where they're receiving feedback from their supervisors, specifically around rubrics 7 and 8, which are the engagement and deepening student learning rubrics. They also complete video observations, so they have an opportunity to film themselves and see what it's like to capture video in a classroom. And they do some of this video recording also in their inquiry courses. So this helps them become comfortable with filming. It also helps them understand that when we're filming in classrooms, we're not filming ourselves necessarily as teachers. We're trying to get at what our students are actually learning. They do a lot of reflection on their teaching effectiveness in guided observation debriefs. This reflection is aligned with some of the Ed TPA rubrics around reflecting on teaching practice. And our multiple subject candidates also do these interactive field work journals that the prompts are not exact matches to the prompts in Ed TPA, and that's intentional, but they are aligned to the prompts in Ed TPA. And I don't know you're able to see this graphic. It was a screenshot. Is there anything you want me to read off of here? I'll read the questions really quickly. So what evidence did you collect to show connections between objective and assessments? If and how did your objectives change? Why? Which interactions with or between students were you happy to see? Why? Which worries you? Why? What challenges came up during the activity? How did you address them? Adjustments you will make to improve future student learning. Describe how you supported students to engage and succeed. Describe how you supported those who struggled or needed support. What questions come up for you about teaching, learning and teaching from your students' engagement in this activity? So these are, candidates are completing these on a weekly basis. They don't have to respond to every single question, but they're picking one that jumps out to them that they can reflect on their practice in guided ways. And then finally, preparing candidates for task 3, which is the assessment task. Our candidates have practice in creating and using evaluative criteria, so rubrics, for instance, or observational checklists that are aligned to their objectives, aligned to standards, and are created in advance of giving students the assessment so they understand what they're looking for as they're looking at student work. They also do student work analysis and they get feedback from faculty on their student work analysis. So they collect data during formative solo teaching experiences in the fall where they're able to look at that data, make some analysis about student learning, and then they get feedback from faculty on that. Our secondary candidates complete a mini Ed TPA in the fall, which they answer 2 prompts from the assessment task of Ed TPA. And then they're also scored on 3 of the Ed TPA, I shouldn't say scored, they're given feedback on 3 of the Ed TPA rubrics with that. And then finally, the MED inquiry course that they take has a strong focus on analysis of student learning. And we found that our candidates are learning how to use student data to make analysis explicit. So a lot of times they've done this analysis in their head, but we're not quite sure how they've arrived there. And so the inquiry course really focuses on making explicit how you're using what you're seeing in student work and student learning to come up with your analysis. So as we transitioned into Ed TPA back in 2014, I believe it was, we realized that candidates needed some specific guided support around what the assessment is asking for them. And so we developed a 2-quarter instructional design course for candidates that supports them through Ed TPA, but is more focused on content of what Ed TPA, I don't know that I'm saying this right, but the pedagogy that Ed TPA is asking, which is understanding how to design learning for students, how to implement that learning, and how to assess that learning. So in the fall quarter, our candidates learn about universally designed instruction for all learners. The instructors of the instructional design courses for each of our program areas align their instruction with the instructors from the exceptional learning course or exceptional learners course, and also the ELD CDI course, so that they're learning to plan instruction for every learner. And then we also have a focus in this course on assessment. So we realized when we were looking at the data early on when our candidates were completing Ed TPA that our candidates needed more support in using assessment to inform their instruction. And so the course really focuses heavily on designing great assessments for students and then using the data from those assessments to plan future instruction. And then there are a lot of formative experiences in these courses where candidates have opportunities to respond to select Ed TPA prompts and receive rubric-aligned feedback. So when we're asking them to reflect on their planning decisions, for instance, we take a portion of prompt 1, which is asking them about how they're aligning their instruction and how they're developing a sequence of instruction over the course of the unit to reflect on. So we don't always use the exact wording of the prompt, but we'll use close wording to help candidates. And then the winter quarter, candidates refer to this as the Ed TPA course, although we want them to think more of it as this is a continuation of instructional design. But this course really does intentionally prepare candidates to do the Ed TPA. We provide them with some samples where they're able to do structured analysis of past candidates' work. The structured analysis is focused on evidence that they are seeing to help them also grow their practice. So when they're looking, for instance, at a sample planning commentary, they're not just looking at like, how do I write this thing, but how do other teachers create alignment between their objectives, their learning tasks, and their assessments? How do other teachers plan to support students with diverse learning needs? So even though it gives them a model as well for completion of their own assessment, the focus is really on also continuing their learning of planning instruction assessment. They do guided peer reviews throughout the course. Again, the focus is on finding evidence that their peers are providing that is aligned with the rubrics. We also offer a lot of collaborative workshop time. So just creating space for them in their schedule to do some of the work of the Ed TPA alongside others in a supportive environment where they have faculty to ask questions as they arise. There were also some questions yesterday around guidelines for acceptable support. And I want to just point out that part of the Ed TPA guidelines for acceptable support is you can question candidates about their work. And so that's part of what we do is we ask candidates questions to support their thinking in making their thinking explicit in their work. So for instance, looking at a video alongside a candidate and say, where are you showing evidence for deepening student learning and forcing that reflection on them? What is your evidence for engaging students, asking them to really come up with that. We're not telling them well, that's not evidence or yes, it is, just to be clear, but helping them do that reflection. The course also paces a TPA for them. So there are suggested deadlines for different pieces of a TPA. It's very chunked, that they're not just given the handbook to complete it all, but they have a very structured pacing plan. The pacing plan can be a little bit tricky because their placements, especially in the secondary level, kind of determine when they're able to teach at TPA. There are certain units that are taught in, for instance, if there's a research unit in a 7th grade social studies class that students are kind of doing some independent research and gathering stuff, that might not be a great unit for a TPA because it's not going to hit some of the subject specific rubrics or really allow candidates to showcase their teaching. So, but we do offer pacing suggestions. We also provide materials for candidates to complete, like the handbooks, understanding rubric level progressions, which Lori referenced in our last meeting, which is a very helpful support document that we look at with candidates. It's not just disbursement of materials, it's actually helping them use those materials to write their Ed TPA. We offer technical support. So are you having trouble uploading? Let's see if we can troubleshoot with you. Show them how to compress video, some of those technical pieces that can cause candidates concern. Our elementary program actually has an Ed TPA week. And so the candidates all teach their Ed TPA learning in the same week. And this is something that our partners have actually welcomed, so they can, oftentimes for our elementary candidates, they have particular units that they know that these are great fits for Ed TPA. A little bit trickier to do that at the secondary level and also for our Ed specialist candidates. And then finally, we offer an Ed TPA camp. So our candidates do not go to student teaching the week that Ed TPA is due. It's always due on a Thursday because we try and make it due Wednesday. The Pearson deadline is Thursday. But they don't go to student teaching that week and have an opportunity to come together in a collaborative space to write and get additional support as needed. I want to clarify some things about the secondary passing standard since that came up in our conversations yesterday. The secondary passing standard is able to be applied for candidates who are within one standard deviation, one standard error of measurement from the passing cut score. So for the 15 rubric handbooks, the cut score is 41. Candidates can score a 38 or better and use supplementary evidence to support that they are ready to teach in the areas in which their Ed TPA scores were lower. So for candidates who, you only allow candidates who are not on a program improvement plan to apply the secondary passing standards. So if we're seeing that there are other places in their student teaching and coursework where they need additional practice and support, we don't allow them to apply that standard. So the candidate works with faculty to identify areas that their Ed TPA scores show they're not ready to teach yet. And also what evidence they would need to provide to demonstrate that readiness to teach. And then they work with their instructors and supervisors to provide that evidence that they're ready to teach in those areas. So supplemental support for candidates. First, we try and take a proactive approach. So for candidates who we are thinking might need additional practice because of what their cooperating teacher is saying, what their supervisor is saying, based on what they're seeing in their field work, we try and encourage the candidates to get additional practice before they submit their TPA. So even though we have a deadline of the end of winter quarter for submission, that's our deadline for them. It doesn't mean that they have to be finished by then. So we do encourage them to get some additional practice if needed. This is maybe one candidate a year. This is not a large sample, but we do want them to be as prepared as possible to complete the assessment. For candidates who haven't passed, they get an early notification. So the TPA coordinator, which is me, gets scores from Pearson early in the morning. Candidates usually, we get them by like 10 a.m. Candidates don't get them until about 5 p.m. So I immediately look at them and reach out to any candidate who hasn't passed, just so they're not shocked when their friends get their scores, and it can be challenging. There's an immediate meeting set up with the TPA coordinator to identify areas with low scores or error codes and create a plan for remediation of those areas. And then we provide wraparound support for any candidate that hasn't passed. So it's the program coordinator, the course instructors, supervisors, cooperating teachers, and the candidate all work together to create a plan for the candidate to remediate. Usually when a candidate hasn't passed, it's one task that needs to be addressed. So they've gotten low scores in one task, maybe two. And usually we have them just repeat those one or two tasks as needed. So what are candidates saying about the assessment? They find that the support that we give them is generally really helpful, that they find the formative experiences of practicing and analyzing to be helpful to them. They like the workshop time. The third comment is about practice that they're doing in the fall. But they also say things like the prompts feel really repetitive to them. It's a ton of work and it feels like you have to game the system. So got to capture just the right thing on video, and then it's hard to show the right things on video for them sometimes, that it feels, I think different content areas are different. So our world languages candidates and our science candidates particularly feel it's tricky to show just the right things on video to demonstrate evidence for the rubrics. We ask in our survey, we give them a bunch of areas of our program and we ask them which ones impact their professional growth the most. You can see EdTPA is at the top. No candidates said that it was a one, it impacted their growth the most. And very few, they had to pick their top three. Very EdTPA is one of the top 3 areas of the program that impact their growth the most. Most of them say student teaching, their cooperating teacher, pretty much everything to do with their field work is most impactful to their practice. Some challenges that we have with EdTPA in our program are most of our placements are very conducive to completing EdTPA, but our ed specialists coordinators have said that it can be challenging to place candidates in classroom, and I'll give a quote from one of our instructors, but it can be challenging to place candidates in classrooms to complete the ed specialist EdTPA in ways that are aligned with inclusion that we value, and also that are going to help them meet the rubrics. Curriculum and pacing in some of our partner schools can be a little bit challenging depending on when certain units fall that are more conducive to EdTPA or not. And then we also had candidates that we placed in alternative secondary placements last year, and they found it very challenging to complete EdTPA in an alternative school. So I thought this was important as we consider if the TPA is reasonable to implement in a wide range of classroom settings. We don't necessarily see the EdTPA as centering a radical asset-based or culturally sustaining pedagogies. It definitely doesn't center it, and it also has some outdated language, like calling students English learners rather than multilingual learners. And that's actually been challenging for our candidates to, first of all, see that language after they've been really thinking about rich asset-based approaches to student learning. And then also for them to figure out what that actually means. Like, are they looking for me to center English learning in this, or are they looking for me to center a multilingual asset-based approach in my instruction? So that's been a challenge. The writing piece, so TPA only allows for candidates to submit written commentary at this point. And then finally, sometimes the submission and reporting dates can be a little bit challenging as we're locked into a schedule by Pearson, which, as I heard Juliet talking about the flexibility, we can submit at different submission dates, but that it can be a little bit of a challenge. Especially this last year, I think there were fewer dates offered for submission later in the year. So candidates who needed additional practice before they submitted did not have as much flexibility there. So some of our faculty have talked about changes, policies, and supports that they would like to see. That was one of the questions I was asked to address. This comment specifically addresses placement for our education specialist candidates. That's what the ESC abbreviation is. Those are candidates in TK through 22 classrooms. And I want to highlight that the requirements of EdTPA feel less aligned with inclusive classrooms. So a co-taught high school classroom is not a good placement for candidates to complete EdTPA just based on what they need to do. Or at least the way we're interpreting what they need to do. And then another colleague of mine wants to see a change to the EdTPA to look a little bit more like a real world practicing teacher product. And he said, I'm not exactly sure what that would look like, but he has some suggestions here. Something that a real world practicing teacher would be asked to do. We have requests to return to some form of local evaluation for our program, that we were really able to unite around a trajectory for candidate learning as we dug into candidate level data with PACT. A request for some sort of student input into teacher evaluation. And then I think this comment, TPA is meant to certify, gets at some of the tensions we've been wrestling with in this group about that summative is informative in nature. What is, we know we have statutes, but at the end of the day, TPA is necessary for a credential. And then a request to involve practicing teachers more in TPA. And that's all I have today.
All right, are there any questions from the work group? Josh.
Two questions, please. First, what made UCSB choose the EdTPA over the CalTPA?
That's a great question. So one is that I think statute changed and we were going to have to do some, we couldn't use local scoring anymore in the way that we had been. There's still a local scoring option for EdTPA. And I think we wanted to be at the forefront of that change. And at the time, EdTPA was the first model sponsor to develop a new assessment aligned with program standards.
And then just one more question, that you had this interactive fieldwork journal.
I'm sorry, can I go back? I want to add a little bit. Sorry, really quick. I just want to add a little bit. We have looked at both since we adopted EdTPA, we have looked at both models, and most recently, when it was required for our ed specialist candidates, CalTPA was the first model out for ed specialist. And so and one of our faculty members was on the design team for that. And we were actually considering switching all of our programs to, we were like, should we do one program on CalTPA, the others on it? How are we going to do this? And so we really looked carefully at both models and decided that EdTPA felt like it would be less impact on our program for candidates. So it's one shebang that they do rather than the 2 cycles. We felt the 2 cycles might be a little more disruptive to our program. And then although we liked some of the more progressive elements in CalTPA, so there is, I think, more of a culturally sustaining approach in CalTPA, a little bit more acknowledgement of the diverse learners in California. It ultimately felt like EdTPA was more aligned with our program in other ways that were structural, that felt like it would be easier to implement. Yeah,
awesome. Thank you. And then my second question was the interactive fieldwork journal. You said it's a time for them to reflect. Is there a time where they actually get feedback from a coach or an instructor as well on that interactive fieldwork journal?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Fantastic.
For the interactive field work journal, you mentioned that the questions, you intentionally did not make them same as at TPA. I was wondering why.
I think we wanted our candidates to feel like they had a broader range of ways that they could talk about their work. So they're aligned to Ed TPA and like asking them to think about some of the same things, but it gave them more room to think about their practice, whereas Ed TPA sometimes feels a little bit more constricting.
I just want clarification. So the program offered by UC Santa Barbara is the residency program. So that's the model where they're student teachers for a year, correct? They're not independent in the classroom.
Yes, Juliet.
It sounds like you created that instructional design course really as a way to kind of prepare them. So if you didn't have a TPA or a TPA, do you think you'd keep that course or?
I think we keep instructional design in the fall for sure. I'm not sure about winter. I think we've talked about, when SB 1263 was originally proposed, which would get rid of the TPA entirely, we started dreaming about like, what would we do in our program if we weren't doing Ed TPA. And we used to have years ago, before my time, there was a portfolio requirement, and we do still have it. It's very pared down. But I think we would build up a portfolio requirement. Not sure what that would look like, but we might offer a course for that would.
Ina?
I was just wondering, if I could have something about something I think that's really important that you brought up in the beginning, Tori, was this culture of collaboration and continuous improvement and sort of engaging with data that the program has had for a really long time. And it's critical because I think when all of our faculty and cooperating teachers are in it, and so many of our cooperating teachers and administrators in our very geographically sort of enclosed area have come out of UCSB as well. So part of what we were talking about of a continuum of service to in-service, everybody understands this culture of looking at student data and really understanding who the students are and what they need in planning next steps. And so what that means is, I think one of the biggest strengths of UCSB program is similar to what Juliet was talking about, in that course instructor, we call everybody faculty. Saying, just because roles, whether they're teaching course or supervising candidates or working in our K-12 classrooms as mentor teachers, but they all are very integral and have a part in planning the program. Actually, they're not separate to that. And that is the all-day retreats where you come together and look at candidate work is so critical because it informs everything across the program, and everybody has a voice in that. We're really critical. Many years ago, some of the people who were farthest, closest to the work of teaching were farthest from the decision-making of the program. In other words, mentor teachers, supervisors of clinical practice. It's still that way in teacher education in a lot of ways. The UCSB program made a very concerted effort to really be sure that we were listening to the voices of the clinical faculty. And frankly, the performance assessment helped us do that. And that was because we all sat down together and looked at practice. And when you're looking at video of what candidates are doing in classrooms, and you have teacher education faculty who haven't been in classrooms seeing their candidates, they get an eye to what's happening. And then they get, they get context from the clinical supervisors in small groups saying, here's what's happening here, and here's my understanding of this, and this is what's going on in this school. And everybody gains a shared understanding of the work vis-a-vis the language of the rubrics, to make sense of what they're seeing. And that's why it's just so critical that we get it right, that we get the language of the rubrics right. But some of the things that Tori, you were saying, differences, LTPA, putting equity, centering in works becomes so critical, and et cetera. Anyway, I just wanted to emphasize the culture of inquiry is a really important piece in teacher education, first and foremost. And assessment. The performance assessment helped UCSB get to that culture of structure that is so much a part of the program now.
All right, we want to thank you very much for presenting today. And with that, we'll take a 5-minute break. And then we'll begin our next presentation. So I would like to invite Patricia to come up and we'll help you get organized and prepared.
You're virtual, so I'm gonna be the DJ.
Fantastic. Welcome, Patricia. We'll start in 5 minutes, okay? Great. Thank you. We appreciate you being here. We are very fortunate to be joined by a team from National University, and I'd like to first introduce Patricia Heidet-Hirsch. And if you will introduce the rest of your team, please. We're so glad you're here. Thank you.
Thanks very much. My name is Patty Heidet-Hirsch, and I'm the Director of Assessment, Accreditation, and Clinical Practice at National University. And I'm joined by my Special Education Department Chair, Dr. Suzanne James.
Hello.
And Associate Director of Clinical Practice, Dr. Roland Nordgren.
Hello. Good morning.
And then we have 2 faculty members who specifically work with our literacy pilot, Ms. Freeman, who also is the statewide coordinator for ITL program, and Joellen Shea, who is a faculty member working with students in both the seminar and the clinical practice coursework and serving as a regional clinical practice coordinator. So they're joining me and helped with this presentation. First slide, please. For those of you that are not familiar with National, I know that because you sometimes know your local university, we are a little bit different. We are, since 1971, a private, nonprofit, open access university, and that makes us different than some of the universities that you may be engaged with. We're also one of the largest private nonprofit universities in the United States. We serve predominantly in our education programs online with all of our clinical practice on the ground. We're also one of the largest Hispanic serving institutions and military serving institutions in the United States. And 2/3 of our students and our graduates track as BIPOC. We serve district partners across the entire state. We have approximately 2,600 MOUs active at this time. And we serve right now an enrollment of about a little over 7,000 students in teacher preparation programs. Next slide. So the pathways for teacher development at National are a little bit different than in some places because we do have the depth and breadth to be able to offer almost every option that's out there at this time. Our internships are predominantly the pathway for our educational specialist students, offering about 80% of our clinical practice is in the internship, which does require a lot more hands-on at the university level. And 32% of our pathway in teacher education is in internships. Student teaching is a pathway that we also offer and we encourage. We think that is one of the better pathways. Internships does serve a need for districts to staff, but we feel like student teaching is a better pathway, which led to our decision to get very heavily involved in residency partnerships. And we received a very large US DOE grant for a Chula Vista partnership called Aspire. And then we also have engaged with 9 partners in the CTC residencies, and we are now serving currently 28 partners in our second year, including one very long-standing partnership with Fresno. In terms of classified employee grants, we jumped into this about a year and a half ago, and we have 24 LEA partners serving almost 200 candidates at this time with 2 very large consortium partners. And these 2 are, I would say the residencies and classified employee grants are very time-consuming, but very rewarding. And then our minority focus group is brand new. We just received another large US DOE grant called DREAMS for developing, retaining education advancement of multicultural scholars. What I know about it so far, it was just announced last week, is that this is a partnership where we are moving a multiple subject student in partnership with an aspiring principal in our admin program, and they will work through their programs together as colleagues. So it's kind of a unique twist. Next slide, please. The Cal TPA value, when we first started looking at this, and we will get to your 3 questions in the next slide, I promise, but we looked at what are the overarching themes we would love to share with you. And the first is that we have had enormous success with the Cal TPA. Our Cal TPA scores are above the state means. We've dedicated quite a bit of time and energy to not only mapping what those skills are, but which of those skills need to be fed back into coursework and which skills are intrinsic skills that we can hone. We're dealing with adult learners. Our average age is 35. So sometimes we have to grasp, what I want to say is the knowledge the students bring to us and assess where they are and what kinds of skills we need to work on more on an individual basis. And our clinical practice courses in particular tend to be one-on-one. Our subtest scores offered very specific areas that were relatable to program faculty, and we felt like that was a huge success. In sharing the data backwards, we found that the conversations created that culture of assessment that we had been looking for at a level that was student-based. And we found over time that that was something that our faculty started to value even more than some of the less reliable data that comes in from individual scoring on the tools that we have when we do classroom observations. In terms of program improvement, those disaggregated scores are our most reliable and actionable program data that we receive. And again, working with so many students, this is huge for us to have actionable data that can be collated in a way that can be digested by each department down to the program level. And then candidates do have a voice in this process as their experiences drive discussions. We do professional learning communities weekly with our candidates, and their feedback then feeds back into some of the meetings that are held with not only the professors teaching those courses, but with the program and the design of courses that we do over the summer. Next slide, please. We do prepare more teachers for credentials than any other institution in California, and we're also a top provider of teaching credentials awarded to starting educators in the US. So when you ask about how does the TPA integrate into our program's coursework, it became something that we took very seriously from the very beginning of this project. And we tried to look at this from 2 different aspects. What is the candidate experience in terms of the integration? And then what is the program faculty experience? Because we felt like they were very much the same and yet also very discrete. So from the candidate experiences, and I know you can all read, but I'm just going to kind of go through them quickly. We integrated the Cal TPA language and concepts into our courses, and this has changed over time. And we do feel like this is really important to know that academic language used on the exam becomes part of the coursework and the nuanced language that they need to learn from the very beginning. We looked at Cal TPA task-based assignments in smaller chunks. So we're starting to look at something like the assets students might bring to the classroom in that first beginning course. And that models some assignments. And it didn't used to be called assets. It used to be called something else in terms of getting to know your students. And we are moving that language all the way down into the very beginning courses and moving it all the way through in a scaffolded approach. We practiced the Cal TPA tasks and fieldwork assignments. And I did see from UC Santa Barbara, Tori had that same kind of perception. We're looking at how can we have people start looking at other teachers teaching in their field work and try to apply some of the skills they are working on that they will then demonstrate in that exit exam, the TPA. We have video analysis and reflection embedded throughout the entire program. It's very predominant in clinical practice. They do up to, at least 7, sometimes 8 or more video captures of their lessons that are then annotated by both the student and the faculty member, and then assessed on a rubric. But we also have embedded some assignments that are video analysis into the coursework prior. So they're very familiar with videotaping and looking at their own performance and reflecting. We look on reflective practice as a focus, and not just one way of reflecting, but we're teaching and modeling different values in terms of different types of reflections, and teaching that across the board to our students, because there are different ways that you might want to consider and bring in peers and evaluate yourself from a different perspective as you reflect. And that leads to the next one, which is modeling this collaborative support. Most of our classes, like I say, are a one-to-one, but they have a PLC model where the professional learning community comes together and brings students in small groups or large groups for their clinical practice experiences. Coursework tends to be larger groups throughout the program, and they do have collaboration and projects built in across the board, even in an online course, which I think students really appreciate. And then we have recently shifted our course sequence to align with the Cal TPA cycles. Because of the literacy pilot experience, we learned that the math courses needed to be much further aligned in the beginning. And students told us, I wish I'd had that math course, right when I was taking that cycle 1. And I really wish I had that language arts courses. There's 2 of them. I wish I could have those right before I'm looking at the cycle 2. So we made some decisions last summer to start to pilot that in all of our residency programs and move that forward for the spring term. Moving over to the program faculty experiences, they review Cal TPA data for continuous improvement. They created scaffolded Cal TPA lesson plan templates. And what this means is not showing up with the whole entire template in the beginning courses, but taking pieces of it that are relevant to the content of that course and expanding upon it in an assignment base. So when they get to the Cal TPA experience, they're familiar with all different ways to slice and dice the different expectations on that exam. And it, again, adds to the depth and breadth of their experience in whatever program or whatever scenario they end up teaching in once they're hired. Faculty professional development includes Cal TPA language and prompts. We constantly remodel this for our faculty and show them what students are doing and how it looks for students so they can digest how that looks in their course. A committee revised the fieldwork and TPEs aligned to assignments. This is an ongoing project every summer. Changes happen every summer. And we provided samples of exemplary work. We want our faculty to see what exemplary work looks like from a Cal TPA perspective and be able to use that as that first hurdle to get to, but we really want to go even further than that. So we're looking at making sure our faculty are very much aware of what it looks like to be successful. And then we explored different models, as I discussed before, of reflective practice, knowing that the same model should not be used across the entire program. And then we also have done extensive research in feedback models and feedback and feed forward. As the word annotation was changed to commentary, we looked at what does that look like in terms of feedback and how do we incorporate that into our design. So that's how we integrated the TPA into our program's coursework. Next slide. So the next question that you posed to us was, how is the TPA integrated into our clinical practice? And again, we took after making our list and kind of chatting through this, we came up with, it really does fit into the same two buckets, candidate experiences and faculty experiences. So the candidates see an alignment between their clinical practice course and their seminar course. Our seminar course is built as a coaching, modeling, collaborative effort. It's almost like they said before, when Tori was talking about having that week-long session. Our week-long session is every week for an entire term. So they are looking at that collaborative effort and aligning what they're doing in clinical practice and how those TPEs and that demonstration feeds into then the analysis of what it looks like to do that on a video and short clips and annotate and explain what you're doing. So that's the implementation of evidence practices in that commentary. And that's a really hard skill for students to learn. And yet we find that once they catch on to it, they're really good at critiquing each other. They'll watch someone else's video and say, ooh, I would say this about in your commentary here, because what you're doing here is this, this, and this. And they really get to the why. Why am I doing this? Why does this matter for the students in my classroom? And they're practicing that all the way back in their methods courses all the way through. Again, that focus on reflective practice, because we do use extensive video, that video analysis, annotation, and next steps become part of our practice in the entire program, which I will say it's partially because of the Cal TPA, but partially because of the COVID epidemic. We ended up finding that we were much more effective teaching online when we had this broad group of people from across the entire state to be able to have different people able to watch the video and then work with that student and coach. So we fused the TPA standards to literacy Cal TPA performance expectations. This was a hard one for us to do. I'm looking at the two people that helped us with this one, Joellen and Louise, as part of the pilot. But it was very interesting to see where we're already doing things and where we had some weak spots that we had to kind of pull together and be more specific and more inclined to call out when we're looking at a literacy standard and teaching our students how to see that as they're teaching. And then blending the discipline-specific Cal TPA supports based on candidate need. So we do have people coming in that have been in a classroom for 10, 15, 20 years, and they have a wide variety of experiences, and yet they don't have the ability to perform all the standards. So we're finding that our program has to be very much individualized. Again, not the traditional 22-year-old learner. It's a 35-year-old learner that has all kinds of other assets bringing into our programs. From the faculty side, they're looking at monthly analysis of Cal TPA data. Like I say, our data is very, very strong and above the state means. Our data results are shared with program faculty, and actionable changes are discussed and then implemented. Our usual time to make shifts is either, again, our courses are offered month by month by month, with clinical practice and seminar running a longer period of time. But our main time to make shifts are either at that December into January term or over the summer. The formal Cal TPA lesson plan templates are coached for all faculty, and this is over, I want to say, well over 300 people that serve as part-time and full-time faculty. And we coach what that looks like and how to coach the ability to complete different portions of the lesson plan in the program, and then all the way through clinical practice. We offer continual professional development updates, and best practices are shared, especially as we see some of the new data coming in that shows the outstanding performances on the exam that is offered by the CTC. We have had active participation in the CTC literacy sessions and mentoring and co-teaching seminar faculty model to support candidate needs. So we have those faculty who are constantly revising what it looks like and attending the different sessions that are offered to keep up to speed. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a huge part of our experience, the Literacy Cal TPA last spring. So we had a large number of participants, and we learned a lot. And I think I'm speaking to people here that were heavily involved, but we did include all of our areas, multiple subject educational specialist candidates. We had 5 for multiple subject and a total of 18 from special education, 12 for mild moderate support needs, and 6 from extended support needs. So this gave us a chance to monitor and adjust the different pieces of that process throughout the experience. And it was, I think the literacy pilot people would tell you, it was building the plane as you were flying it, so to speak. But week by week by week, as the different templates were shared, we had to go back to what do our students know and where are the weaker areas or the gaps, and be able to work with our students. And that helped us to know how to define those gaps for faculty teaching those literacy courses. And the templates provided that roadmap, so to speak, as to exactly what the expectations look like. And when we found that the expectation was something students were not as able to address or to speak to, we knew where to go to make that change. And that happened very, very quickly. The materials from all the meetings were shared with our department faculty, so they got kind of a preview as to what was coming and were able to digest what was there, but also have a feeling for what was coming down and what might end up being the next process. And those recommendations and insights were in a clinical practice retreat, which ran for 2 days in May of 2024, which then drove all of our changes going forward for those summer months, and some of the major program shifts in terms of how to deal with and integrate literacy across other courses besides just the 2 literacy courses, and what assignments would nail that down for us to help students be more successful and to help them to take this knowledge and be able to apply it in whatever setting they might be placed with. And those recommendations then and insights were included in the literacy standard work that we had to submit in October. We are also involved in the Cal TPA literacy field test that starts this spring. We just got our email a couple of days ago regarding when those sessions start. So Joellen and Louise and RD will be attending those meetings and looking forward to what that brings for us in terms of best practices that we can then help to integrate into, let's face it, courses that sometimes were not necessarily literacy focused. And the math class, for example, how do we push that there? What kinds of assignments can we work through, and which of the literacy components might apply to the math sections. Next slide. Okay, the next question, again, we split it. I guess we're just doing both things here. The changes, policies, and supports could help streamline assessments and coursework. We looked at it, what could we do? And we've been thinking about this for quite some time. It was partially from a list from our retreat last summer. And so we wanted to share with you what we think, where the ball is in our court and what kinds of things we're going to need possibly some help with doing, but some things that we know we can handle. It just takes a lot of time. One is to enhance the student experience in using tools and skills to be successful in the process of Cal TPA, not only the product. And my colleague Tori also mentioned this is sometimes the video capture. It's sometimes having that peer to work with to help you to be able to decide how something might be perceived. But it's also some of the processes with the metacognition and what I know and how I can apply it and how do I do that shows what I'm doing in the best possible light and covers all the bases. The use of a rubric was found to be very difficult. And that's the second one. Expand the focus on creating and using rubrics. So students are taught how to read a rubric, they're taught how to create a rubric, and yet when it comes to the Cal TPA, they're asked to integrate them in so many different ways in assessing their own work and then assessing their learners and helping their learners learn to assess their own work. So this whole rubric design and how to use rubrics and what do rubrics do and is it something beyond a checklist became a really important focus for us to work on and to improve our practices in the different modalities of how rubrics can and should be used. Next is increase the use of executive function skills, cognitive and metacognitive strategies. And this is where we find that students may have the content knowledge and be very good with the metacognition or the cognitive pieces, but the metacognition in terms of planning, organizing, and showing their best work and accepting feedback in a way that they can apply that feedback becomes something that we're really, really, really trying hard to help, again, with our adult learners. Strengthening the calibration of faculty for common expectations and vocabulary utilized in the Cal TPA. Working with our faculty that have taught the same course for a while, this is a hard one, and yet we've had some success with showing them what the students have to do and what the goal might be for a student to be able to do in terms of their writing skills in particular, and helping the faculty be able to calibrate what that means in their class. We've spent a good deal of time at our university emphasizing the social emotional learning aspects of candidate well-being. This is a lot for candidates, and we acknowledge that. So the support services around candidates need to be extensive. They are oftentimes, again, 80% in special education, they are full-time teacher while they're doing this work. And that's a very, very difficult predicament. We do find that the lowest area, or the one area that is probably the weakest link for our students is the writing skills. They haven't, as an adult learner, often had a chance to do the level of writing they may have done in their undergraduate programs. So we're coaching the writing skills constantly all the way through the program and aligning our university resources to support that. Next slide, please. So these are pieces we'd love some help with. We would love you to continue to emphasize the social emotional aspects of candidate well-being and acknowledge that sometimes the work is a little bit of an overload for students, especially when things change too quickly. We would love you to engage in comprehensive statewide trainings on Cal TPA areas to district employees beyond the expectation of the 10 hours required for those who supervise our candidates. So again, we're across the entire state. Maybe I've had one supervisor in a particular school in Northern California, but I'm kind of worried that my student teacher might be listening to other people during lunch who have never taken a Cal TPA, have no idea what it is, what it looks like, don't know what the literacy standards might be for that student, and they're coaching and mentoring that person as well. So we feel like something that is more broadly delivered to the entire teacher workforce in California would really help our students. Suzanne's group in special education, we won't have a person who has 3 years experience who also took the Cal TPA available to us to supervise a student teacher for 2 more years. So any mentor we put somebody with in a classroom in special ed will not have any experience with the Cal TPA, and that needs to change. Release the updates in late spring. I know this is a Pearson problem. I'm hoping you have can help with that. to allow the universities to prepare and implement changes. We get the changes end of July. Our classes start August 3rd. Not enough time to make significant changes. This year we did get a notice where they weren't quite finalized, but this is the changes you can anticipate, and that was a lot more helpful. Provide updates to Cal TPA samples in time to be applicable for candidate use. We would love to see them come out quarterly, come out every 6 months. It seems like we've had the same samples now for a while. I know Suzanne's group is still waiting for the samples to come through, but those are very, very useful, not just for students, but also for faculty. So we would really appreciate if that was a priority. And an operationalized TPE 7 to specifically address examples for foundational reading embedded in upper grade levels. This was one piece that we found in the literacy pilot that was really hard to come by. And we think that we would love to have either a work group, and we'd be happy to be part of that, or work with the CTC to provide some help for us in that area. That would be very, very, very appreciated. Provide timely supports and materials for those piloting or field testing new protocols. Again, I know that it's always kind of on the fly with some of the pieces, but the materials to be turned around while students are in classrooms teaching, and to be able to do an all-call meeting. We need to meet with you tonight because they just changed something. You need to get on the call no matter what, because this is due on Friday, is very stressful to students. And going back to bullet number 1, we're trying really hard to address the social emotional learning of our students. And then the last one, plan for condition code submissions to provide feedbacks. Right now, students get a feedback code and they don't get any feedback. So we would love it if the feedback would come through. Either we know that the scores, most of us are scores. We know that the scores give them feedback, but then they code them for a reason that is something they need to change or do. But they just get the code back. So from their perspective, students are very concerned. They don't know which parts were okay, which parts were not okay. So we're hoping that in some way that feedback could be shared with the student in a way that would be actionable. Next slide. And that's it. I know, a lot of stuff, only 8 slides, but lots of stuff, right?
Thank you so much. I'm going to open it up to the work group to ask questions. Go ahead.
Hi, Patricia. Do your supports, it's just something I was wondering. You have a bunch of different programs from internship, student teaching, and residency. Your supports that you provide, I know you're speaking very broadly about the supports. Do they vary based off of program type, or do they look the same across all programs?
They vary based on program type, but I should also say there are also levels of the support. So everyone takes the seminar course. And in the seminar course, if they are able to submit Cal TPA Cycle 1, they move on to the B course. If not, in that window of time, usually a month between those 2 sections, they're put into a more rigorous one-to-one work with a person. If they don't pass it, we go to a whole nother program called Next Steps. If they are an intern and don't pass it, they are then into a support course called a C course. And the C course has a group of people that are working on Cal TPA, a group of people that might be working on RECA, a group of people that are working on continuous improvement with their videos. So we have different levels of the support depending on the student need. Additionally, we've spent a lot of time and money to come up with a online tutorial, and students love this idea in that when and if they are ready or have what they need to be able to go back to what they learned in their seminar course, they tell me they'll run the video on their phone while they go back to their template for Cal TPA and start to fill in some of the pieces. So we offer on your own if you want to do it that way with the video recordings, or you can go to different drop-in sessions. Monday nights, every Monday night is a very large session, then it breaks into individual sessions, and then it breaks into PLCs with small groups throughout the entire year.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Would you also like to know what we do university-wide to support our students? Because we do have many layers of supports for our students beyond that, where we have companion hours offered by our credentialing department to help them navigate that time period when they're also so focused on the Cal TPA, but also thinking about their credential. We have student well-being, where we refer students for a host of concerns, from financial to social emotional to just not being able to cope at that time. So our seminar teachers are very good about it, cluing in when our students need extra support around there. Our library provides extensive support in that they offer 2 nights a week Zoom sessions where they support candidates in either completing the CSET or RECA or any other testing. And that's really helped them because it focuses more not on the tests, but on how to take tests and how to navigate the types of test questions that will be given. You know, just the prompting of the commentary requires a lot. We have our library also provides not only one-to-one writing assistance for students to get support, but also open hours to come in and just ask questions and get help. As many of our students, English is not their first language. And so they have extensive supports. We also have individuals who speak many different languages to support them as well across our university so that we can make sure the student feels comfortable to ask the questions in their primary language. What else? Gosh, guys, come on, there's a lot. So for me, coming from a state-run university, I didn't have those levels of support during the Ed TPA. When I was in Illinois, we did Ed TPA for 10 years. And so for our students, we feel like because they are non-traditional students, many of them are working full-time, caring for their adult parents, but also their young children. Many of our students are financially struggling. And that is causing a lot of undue stress on them, especially when they're involved in student teaching that is a non-paid student teaching. So we have lots of support systems in addition to what our credentialing and seminar courses do around the Cal TPA.
Thank you. Tina?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. And the things that we're wondering about in particular is with respect to the experiences of interns and intern credentials and how they're supported in the TPA process. As we all know, full-time work as a teacher is hard enough in and of itself. And I wanted to know if you could give me a better sense of what a week looks like for an intern candidate. So who is in their classroom? Who are the people who are there? What are they doing to support them? And how well do those support staff know the TPA?
So we require, CTC requires that we have a person who is assigned we call them an SSP, a site support provider. And that person has to have a credential match. They have to be recommended by the principal to be that support person. We do a triad meeting, which is usually between an hour and a half to start the meeting with that intern when they're first assigned. And that's where we are training that SSP, what the Cal TPA looks like and what the TPEs look like. And we are the people at a university level that are then coaching that SSP to be able to do the work alongside us. Many of those SSPs end up working with us as university support providers down the road. So we have a nice group of people that kind of do both. But that is definitely one of my concerns, is that other people they interact with in that school are not able, including sometimes the administration, to give much support. That we are not training the entire school. We're training that one person to work with. There's also a 10-hour required training that each SSP goes through. That is the person working in the classroom on a daily basis, walking through, working with at grade level meetings or the department meetings, working with content specifically. And then our university support provider meets with that person and touches base with that person in a regular time frame on a weekly basis, sharing documentation, phone calls. They jump on Zoom together, and they do that same support that you would see if somebody was coming in face to face. Does that answer your question? No.
Yes, and I know it's a complicated question and multi-part. So in a week, you could just.
In a week, in a week, let's say on Monday night, they would have their Cal TPA meeting that goes from 5 to 7, and they would be given what their task was for that week. They would then break into small groups and talk through each person's issues, ideas, thoughts, concerns about that task. And most of them would start to kind of nibble at that and share their screens and work together in small groups. Again, they had already taught a full day on Monday. Okay. On Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they would have an open opportunity to be invited into whatever section they're with their university professor. And they would have what we call a PLC meeting, where they would be talking about the clinical practice work, the TPE, building their lesson plan, what's going on in the classroom, what are you struggling with, how's discipline going, let's share the video that you did yesterday and show how you dealt with those 2 students that were off task. Did you try this strategy, did you try that strategy? And then by Friday, they would have an open access to one of their faculty members, either their on-site person, that SSP, or their university support provider, to touch base before the weekend, because sometimes the weekend is when our candidates choose to do some of the work. So we get a lot of phone calls on Fridays, Friday afternoons, and lots of texts on Saturday mornings. I just opened this up. I'm a little confused with question number 3. Can you help me? So it's this constant back and forth on their time. We're finding that this group of people are extremely active with text messaging, constant text messaging. And so as they're working, they're reaching out in text and just calling out. I'm on question number 14. Can you call me for 5 minutes? Just explain to me what you're asking here. And we'll have to call them. So
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
That's the support. Yes.
They're also in classes during their internship throughout their entire 8 months of internship. So they will have a nightly class every week that they will attend, but we also provided in a video format so that they can review and analyze, because on a Wednesday night you're a little tired. So the videos go back up and they're encouraged to rewatch the videos and do the coursework along with it. And then we've aligned our program coursework. We're moving for all students to more of what we've found very successful with our residency model, which is having courses that align better to when they're in each cycle of the Cal TPA. So it's very hard being an intern. It's very, very hard. And so in special education, as I said, we have 80% of our students who are interns and also taking courses to complete their degree at the same time. So we've also moved their master's capstone classes until after they complete the Cal TPA and have made it more of an action research. So they're familiar with that concept, because basically Cal TPA is on its most basic level is an action research project. And so, and then we have student support teams. So alphabetically, all 2,000 of my special education students that I have in any 1 month who are taking classes will be also assigned a student support team. And so everyone in the department notifies if there's any concerns for a student's well-being or their ability to keep up with the coursework, or if they need extra support beyond what is available to them in the normal class session. So it's very hard to be an intern. But we have a very successful rate of our interns being able to graduate and secure positions within their districts afterwards.
Matt?
Thank you. So one thing I'm noticing, not just unique to your presentation, is that a lot of the things that are embedded in the program and a lot of the and the supports, I guess, are pre-submission. I was hoping you could maybe say a little bit about what sort of supports or what you have embedded post-submission, so after people are getting their scores back. And I'm particularly interested in all candidates, not just the ones who got failing scores and need to review.
So I can answer that from clinical practice perspective. So if a student is successful on the Cal TPA, they still have to write that individualized development plan. And have you seen that format that the state requires? It's by strategy, and talks to both the CSTPs, it talks to the TPEs, and it talks to the Cal TPA. And the way that we've done the form is that we give the district that will be hiring that person in an intern. They're probably already hired, but they still have to go into an induction program. And that's where we unpack the strengths. And so that we do go through exactly what you're saying, their entire score report, and detail for them what we saw in their clinical practice experience, what we saw from their scores on their Cal TPA, what we saw with their TPE rubrics. And again, there are 8 total rubrics there to assess, including a formative and a summative at the end of each course. And detail for them where their continued work needs to be. And that person is in that discussion, as is the classroom teacher, that SSP, and the university support provider. For those who do not do as well, we offer the 3 different levels of support. It's either they can have a one-to-one coach, and that's predominantly what happens over the summertime. People are trying really hard to credential before they're hired. You know, they have a job offer, they have to credential by August 1st, or that offer goes away. So we jump in and help them individually on their own time. We also have what we call Next Steps, which is a course-based, and you can join it at any time throughout the year. And that is a smaller group of people, but then break into individual coaching, and they work through whatever section they're having trouble with. We don't want to put someone who's working on cycle 1 with someone who really wants to work on cycle 2, or someone who just has the assessment piece of cycle 2 to do. We don't want them to be working with someone who's working on the lesson plan from cycle 2. So it's very much prescribed with a professor who is just working with students who are addressing the exact same thing. And then the third option we have is the online videos for people that can't attend any of those sessions, but are very concerned that they want some help with, you know, part C on cycle 1. And here's where you can go for that. Please let us know if you'd like someone to work with you as you navigate this. Does that respond to your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Juliet?
So, thank you. I have 2 things. One is a follow-up to Tina's question. Patty, when you were talking about the week of the interning, you described those open meetings. Are those required or are those optional?
They are required. However, when students cannot attend, we videotape everything, and it's posted within 15 minutes after that session is over. And then usually when they watch the session, most professors require them to email and either talk about questions, they give them that feedback loop as well. And that's common across most online programs.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if you said that earlier and I missed it.
No, I probably didn't. And again, I'm speaking from clinical practice and Suzanne's speaking from the program courses. So between the 2 of us, you're going to get the whole picture.
Appreciate that. Thank you. My other question is, do you do anything to follow up with the candidates to ask them their perception of the level of support you provided and collect that data and evaluate that?
RD is our survey guy. So yes, we do. Go ahead, RD.
No, absolutely. Yes. We have a survey that is in our B course, which is the second course in clinical practice. We have 2 B courses. One is the seminar. The other one is their clinical practice. And we are implementing that starting in just a few months. We're just waiting for it to be built in Qualtrics.
Thank you.
And Patricia?
Yes. Hi, I think this question might be more for Suzanne. So I'm a special educator. I'm itinerant, so I see lots of things. And I guess one thing I'd like to know in your experience, or because of the high internships that you have, is what kind of district supports do your interns get, and specifically around paid time off to kind of complete these assignments. And I know sometimes it's more work to get a sub because you got to do sub plans, but I just wanted to ask that question.
Well, unfortunately, there's a wide range of support that districts offer, from, pretty intensive support for an intern all the way to not much support. So there is a lot of disparity. So what we do is we control what we can do within our university, and have layers of support, and making sure that we're all accountable for student success. It's one of our 5 pillars of our university, is ensuring student success and building trust with each other. So we have a comprehensive support system. We we also review every intern's placement before they're allowed to be part or before we'll agree that that's an internship that will meet the requirements at national. And so if our RCPCs, our regional clinical practice coordinators, review the classroom, review the schedule, talk to the school district, and know what will set up a student for success as far as the Cal TPA. And so we might deny a placement for an internship. We've had a lot of difficulties with storefront schools, online schools for students with special needs. And so we let the student know that that is not going to be a placement that we can agree, because we know for fact that that's not going to be a placement that you will be successful based on experience with the Cal TPA. Patty, what else have we?
I'm going to say this is an ongoing thing, because it's kind of we've gotten our name is out there for, Nashville has online, a student in this remote area of the mountains can definitely attend that college, and let's hire this person. And so the districts are scrambling to meet the needs of their special needs and other areas as well, teacher shortage areas. So oftentimes they'll hire someone first, and then they'll shop which university is going to accept them as an intern. And that puts all of us as universities in a very hard position, because we have to say no at least 3 times a week. That I'm sorry, our student has passed the exams and is taking coursework for extensive needs support, and you're putting them in a classroom where they are going to be an aid monitoring, a push-in for mild moderate. That is not an appropriate placement for this degree. And then I get really somewhat not nice emails back from a district saying that you're not having a teacher workforce. Can you please help us out here? But
Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
We get them all the time.
Our statement back is, we are working with a developing teacher. You are welcome to hire this teacher once they've completed their program. I'm sure your place is a wonderful place to work, but our developing teacher deserves more than that at this time. And that's a tough one for us. And it is mostly in special education that we're pushed to the limit. And so many universities have gotten out of internships at this point that I feel like, in terms of teacher workforce, there's not too many of us left that are able to do that staffing in remote areas.
Did that answer your question, hon?
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to get more, and again, because you are more statewide, you've seen a lot too. So thank you for sharing yours.
Well, and I think that we mentioned in our PowerPoint the idea of district level statewide professional learning around the ideas of, what is good teaching as it is documented in the Cal TPA. The Cal TPA is not too far from what a good teacher does on a daily basis, assesses, plans, and instructs, and really looks at the individual learners in their classroom. And so for us, it's a little difficult because we are, that research to practice gap that is prevalent in the literature, of course. And because we work with so many districts, we have a really good perspective of qualitative data around what good districts are doing to support their students and what aren't. And on my side, I feel my heart just crying for some of our students when I hear the stories of how they are not supported, how they feel so inadequate. But, they have to feed their children. So they took a job maybe in a very tough classroom, and they wish they had more support. So they seek us out at the university for that support when the district doesn't provide it. So we would encourage, much more around early teacher mentoring, professional learning, as well as the Cal TPA at the district level.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your program with us. We appreciate it.
We appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Our last presentation will be from Riverside County Office of Education. So I'd like to invite them to come up and settle in. We'll take a 5-minute break and start quickly at 11:30, please. I just want to do a quick check on the agenda so that everyone is aware of our schedule. We are going to complete our last presentation, which we're thrilled to have you here to do. And then after that is the opportunity for the public to comment. Following public comment is work group discussion. And we're anticipating a vast discussion likely to happen. So we may, depending on timing, about 12:30, take a lunch break in the middle of work group comment and come back after. But I know we have a few people who have other appointments, and I want to make sure they have the opportunity to share their thoughts before they have to leave the meeting. So that way we can kind of balance. Just a quick look around the room. I know we have 2 people that have appointments. Are there any additional people that have appointments this afternoon? 3. But it's not till, can you stay till 3? Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, like I have an appointment at 4:30 online, but I was just thinking maybe going home for it.
Okay.
So I like to just as soon as possible.
Okay.
Since I hear other people are leaving too.
But if we have less than 13, we have to stop the meeting in its
I mean,
entirety.
I could join from my car. I just don't know how productive.
Okay. Okay.
It's like.
You do it from a car. Okay.
Kate has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kate?
I can try to stay and arrange other childcare. I have a sick kid. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for letting us know, Kim.
Yeah, can I just, sorry, the teacher in me feels it's important just to acknowledge there was an election yesterday. And without getting into the political affiliations or whatever causes you were for, I think it's just important to note that some people are doing better than others. And I hope that we're sensitive to our needs. Self-care is really important. We're also sensitive to other people's needs in this moment. So I just wanted to say, like, I feel like it's this big elephant in the room that
I appreciate that.
addressed. As educators, if we're not talking about it, where are our students going to be?
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
So have we done a head count? Have we counted to 13?
We are good right now.
We're good now, but after people leave, we won't be.
We're gonna be close.
So at what time do you think we're gonna lose our quorum?
We're not until Patricia leaves.
Okay. That's okay.
No, don't worry. Just let it, we'll just try to, at lunch, I'll check in with you.
Let's do it from here, but then that means I'm leaving Fresno at 6 p.m. and it's kind of late.
It's really okay. We did this with the commission also.
Okay.
You know. Hold on. And so you're gonna leave at 2:30?
I'll leave around lunchtime. I know I have to be, there's a national board seminar that I'm doing between 4:30 and 6.
Okay.
So like I said, I was gonna stay here till 3, hang out, but if I can leave early, that would be great. It's a 3-hour trip.
So, and Devin is okay, and Shayna? So we've got 12 in the 7, 13, 14, and Kate, who may need to go get kids if she can't figure, and, you know, but if we've got Devin and Shayna.
We're okay.
And we lose Patricia, which is totally okay. Yeah. We don't bear any burden for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
14 in here, 15, 16, 17.
Okay, to go
Be
to
okay.
then, right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
We're losing 5
Losing 5
out of 17.
out of 7.
We'll be down to 12.
Okay.
So we won't. So we'll just move that part of the agenda. So let's try to make as much use of our time before we go to lunch. So if you need a snack or something else, I have some things in a bag up here. There as needed. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome our team from Riverside County Office of Ed, which is a completely different type of program who uses the Cal TPA. So excited to hear how your program uses that. And I'll allow you to introduce yourselves.
Perfect. Okay. Welcome and thank you first off for the work that you're doing. It's going to have a really big impact and really help our programs and help our guidance as we go through. So I'm Andrea Mazo and this is Alan Hollis. And just to let you know a little bit about our background as we're starting. Alan and myself were both administrators for different programs. Alan oversees our Ed Specialist program. We have the MMSN and the ESN, intern credential programs. And I oversee the new PK3 program for us. So I'm very excited about that. Alan and I we both hold multiple subject credentials, Ed Specialist credentials, and I have my ECE director's permit. So we kind of have a vast array of areas that we look at. And we both happen to be lead assessors for the state for the Cal TPA MMSN. Alan oversees cycle 1. He's the lead assessor for that. And I'm the lead assessor for cycle 2 for the state. And so at the end of our presentation, after we tell you how we embed it, if you do have some specific assessor questions that possibly we could offer some clarity on, we'd be happy to do that as well. And additionally, Dr. Hollis was on the design team for the Ed Specialist TPAs that we have for the Cal TPA. So that's, you know, he did a lot of work on this and has a lot of background knowledge that he's bringing into the room. And then lastly, we were both program managers in our induction program and oversaw induction. And I oversaw induction programs for several large districts in Riverside County while we were going through the pandemic. And we had the TPA in the induction program. So I kind of have a little bit of experience with that as well. Okay. And so this is our wonderful leadership that we have under our executive director, Dr. Estrada Reveles. We are a school of education. So we have the Center for Teacher Preparation. That's where our intern programs lie. And that's led by Melanie Oliver. We have the Center for Teacher Innovation, which encompasses the largest induction program in the state of California, and that's led by Tanya Almeida. And then we have the Center for Administrative Preparation, which houses both the PASC and CAS credentials, and that's led by Dr. Ronnie Henderson. So we are a full service school of ed for our areas. Okay, so a little bit about our intern programs. 4 semesters. 2-year intern program for our multiple subject and PK3 and extensive support needs and mild to moderate support needs. So all 4 of them. We also have the DSCTE programs, but that's not quite the same as what we do with the TPA. Our candidates complete 165 hours of pre-service coursework before securing that teaching position to be the teacher of record. And then we have a small cohort group that we kind of design our program around. We have 4 to 8, sometimes 9 if we have to, of our interns with a supervisor. And I was laughing as you talked about the faculty staffs. We do have about 30 plus supervisors that we work in, but we're the faculty staff. That's it. So I think we need a retreat too, because I went, retreat? What the heck? We don't do a retreat hour. It's just Alan and I, and Alan is our TPA coordinator as well. So he does a lot for our program. We are fully online. So we do weekly synchronous sessions over Zoom with ongoing asynchronous coursework, readings, and field experience. Okay, so we engage with covering all of the TPEs, plus the PK3 credential has a extra TPE that's not listed up here. We also have the math TPE. So we've written for the new math TPE that will be coming to you soon. We are working on that as well, but it's they're all embedded in all of the work that we do. And Alan made a really cool chart, I think, that shows how we are using the TPA to cover all of our TPEs as we go through our program. And we tied it to the rubrics because we spent a lot of time with the rubrics. And it's just, I think it really shows how the rubrics highlight the TPEs and how we are focusing them in on the work that we're doing. So all of this will be given to you in your resources. You can look through any of our documents if we do and use anything that you see from them if you find a program or someone you want to share it with.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Andrea. And again, thank you to the work group for all the hours and plane miles and travel to engage in this important topic. I'm going to talk a little bit about our Ed Specialist intern programs. Wanted to start with a little bit of our current demographic data. This is our program year where we have rolling cohort starts, so we're going to be over 200 pretty quick here. As we know, they're still hiring special ed teachers throughout the year, so there is no off season in education, as we know. So yeah, we have a pretty diverse group of interns and aspiring educators. Wanted to touch on our passing rates. I know there was a lot of discussion yesterday, great discussion around condition codes. So wanted to point those out. We've had 4 condition codes. It's interesting. 2 of them were because of the waivers. We encourage them to sign up for both cycles. Do it now while it's free. And they submitted to the wrong one.
Oh, shoot.
So again, law of unintended consequences. So that was 2 of them. 2 of them were rubric related. In cycle 2, you need to show 3 to 5 lessons. They had it under 1 lesson, so it wasn't distinguishable. So that did get bounced back. We did have 1 intern overall who did not earn a passing score. And I will say, we talk about the stress of the TPA. She actually submitted from the hospital. She was in with COVID. And even though we're like, it's cool, the next submission window is okay. A lot of people who go into education are type A, right? And they want to do and overachieve. So it did not earn a passing grade. She did resubmit when she felt better and did earn a passing grade next time around. So how are we embedding the TPA into our clinical practice? The answer is day 1, and we do it collaboratively. Okay, we've heard a lot of great discussion. We have amazing intern supervisors who give our candidates formative feedback all along the way. But it's not just the feedback they get from their supervisors. We really believe in peer feedback and the cohort model. And we put that into place from day 1. So all of their observation cycles, and we steal the templates almost exactly from the TPA cycles. So they're practicing what they need to do on these cycles. We do add some extra stuff. We do add a little bit more around culturally relevant pedagogy and, or some PK3 items. But they are really working with those templates from day 1, and they're engaging in that plan, teach, assess, reflect, apply cycle in Canvas. And that's our LMS. And these assignments that they submit, these artifacts that they submit of their teaching and planning, they're basically message board assignments. So when they upload them, it's not just their supervisor seeing them. From day 1, they are commenting on each other's work. And this is not a solo process. We want our students in K-12 to collaborate. We really believe it's important for our teacher candidates to collaborate as well. So we do have that video and video annotation practice where they're uploading into Canvas Studio. They're watching each other's videos. They self-annotate. They annotate on each other's. Their intern supervisors are providing 2 levels of formative feedback with each observation cycle. They're doing some public comments on Canvas Studio for the benefit of the whole cohort. And then they might be doing some more evaluative stuff in the grading section that would be private just to the intern candidate. So yeah. From there, we also integrate this into our coursework. We want to make sure they are prepared for the content as well as the nuts and bolts of the TPA. We are an intern program, right? So we talked about the challenges around intern placements. If we have a high school special ed intern who teaches math, they're really gonna need those literacy courses before tackling the literacy part of the TPA, or vice versa. So they have 2 math courses before they engage in our TPA cycle 1, which we do in semester 3 of our program. They have 3 literacy courses that they engage in before cycle 2, which is in our last semester, at the start of our last semester, semester 4. And again, the formative feedback that they get through these observation cycles, they do over a dozen observations with these similar templates and video annotation titles and all the different things they're going to need to succeed on the TPA before the main event. They get a lot of dress rehearsals. What we also found, as many people said, interns are busy and they are stressed. I mean, you try and add a 5-question multiple choice quiz and like it's the end of the world, right? Because they are literally filled to the brim. So what we do, usually they take their practicum courses along with their curriculum courses at the same time. We pause the world for them for 5 weeks where they're only doing field work and TPA. We used to have it where we would tie stuff directly maybe to courses, but again, you have that added stress, right? Oh man, this is due Sunday. I got to get it in Sunday. So we really just say, look, do your fieldwork experiences. And those clinical practices are really intentional for the TPA. So for cycle 1, their clinical experience is to go talk to the general educator and related services about your 3 focus students. For cycle 2, it's, go observe another teacher do student self-assessments. So we try and make it practical to what they're actually doing on the TPA. So it feels like more of a help than, oh man, I got to do this extra thing. And really how you sell it is important. It's really important. We tell them, look, you've done this over a dozen times already. You've got this. We're giving you 5 weeks where you could just focus on this. You've been doing this for a year and a half while taking 2 classes. So we have found kind of lowering that anxiety. It's never going to go away because this is a high stakes thing. But it does really, really make a difference.
And then while we're doing that, Alan will meet for the 5 weeks with a cycle 1 candidate. We're going through that, take them through everything step by step. And I meet with the cycle 2 candidates and take them through that step by step. So they really do have that support from us. And we leading the work, it's helpful for us to lead them through that process as well, we feel.
Yeah, absolutely. We had questions about what does that week look like? So I could give a little bit of an example. Tuesday nights from 5 to 6 would be their TPA support session. So it'll be myself or Andrea walking them through kind of the macro and micro of the cycle they're working on. Let's talk about step 1 plan, and we'll look at the artifacts. We'll talk through it together. They have materials, checklists. We go through the rubrics. And then from 6 to 7:30, they're in their small cohorts. Okay, this is not just someone solo at a testing center, right? And if they cough too loud, are you talking? Or they are working together the whole time on this TPA. So I just want to, there's a little bit of a misnomer out there that in the field that this has to be something, it's just them and they can't talk to anybody. There's limitations on what we can say and guide, but the peer support part of this is pretty much unlimited. And it's something we really, really encourage. And then on Thursdays, we have office hours that they could come to. Another important part I forgot to mention about this 5 to 6 p.m. It's not just the interns who are going through the TPA, it's also their supervisors who are attending. So they are hearing the minutia of the artifact or the focus of that week that then they'll be later supporting their candidates with. We do go over this stuff with our supervisors at orientation and ongoing training, but they're working professionals, right? It's 2 days ago is probably too far in their mind. So we want to make sure it's fresh for them each week as they're supporting their candidates with each step. Again, we have a self-assessment and peer editing checklists for each step and each artifact that they submit. So the expectation is for them to first go through it themselves and make sure everything is there. And then they go through it for a peer. And honestly, the toughest thing is convincing them not to pick their friend who will just check off everything and say it looks great. Providing that actionable feedback is something we really try and coach from day one, because that's tough.
We do have those linked in there. So if you want to go through and see our checklist that we have for them and their peers for both cycles, you're welcome to do that. And if you need to, I think we've shared them with the CTC. They share them sometimes. You're welcome to use them as well for your programs.
Absolutely. Turn it back to Andrea.
So in the PK3 program this year, we are so excited. We are currently participating in the field test for the math cycle. So this has been really amazing for me and the candidates that I have going through this. We're doing a little bit different than Alan has done with his program. And Alan, can you kind of touch on this link? So this was a template. Yeah, that whole thing's a big link. This is a template provided by the CTC asking us if we would consider going through kind of like a 9-week process of breaking down the TPE, going through it. We added our checklist on here. I made them for the PK3 program as well. And I mean, the dates are on there. This is my document that the candidates have. We're sharing it now, and it's working so well because each week we're doing a little bit of it and really talking about it, diving into it with the candidates, with their supervisors. And it's also being connected. So instead of like taking time and being all by ourselves, we're doing it while we're going through our math course, while we're tying it into the math standards of practice. All of that is being seen all at once. So they really are coming at this understanding what is being asked for them to do. So I would say when you get these templates from the CTC, they're piloting this right now, but I believe it'll become something that they would be sending out to other people. It's fabulous because it has really helped structure their thinking and they're going through the process, but also the supervisors as well, because the supervisors see all of the connections that need to be made to help support the candidates in the field. So the benefits is just, it's really clear and easy for them to understand. And it's helping to support language because in the PK3 program, we are really lifting up our early childhood educators that are very well educated, many of them with their master's degrees in early childhood. But lesson planning and going through this is a little bit different than what they've done before in a preschool setting. So it's taking those experts in the field, bringing them up, and kind of guiding them through the TPA process. It's helping bridge from what we have in our ECE world to what we see now in the public school system. So I use the TPA a lot as a bridge to help direct them and to help them see, like, how are we going to do these lesson plans? Because it's very different the way that we do lesson plans in ECE than how we're doing them now in the K through 12. So to me, the TPA is a tool that I can use to help guide these teachers as they're making that transition. So it's to me fabulous, and I'm a true believer in it. So I guess I'm a little biased in that part, but it really has been wonderful with the candidates. And I did ask the commission or Pearson to release my scores to you at the end of the field test and maybe to send them to you. I know you guys will still be meeting because I want you to see how they're doing. I have 14 candidates right now that have started, and I want you to see their scores to see if this actually really was a valid thing that we went through, so you can decide yourself using that process. In our clinical practice, we tie everything through our clinical practice, and Alan doesn't have to link on this, but this picture is a link too for you to see. So you can see how we're tying in that plan, teach, reflect, apply from the TPA into every single week of the entire semester as we're going through this process. So it's really, it's been a great guide to help with a structure of our clinical practice. And you see what they're learning, they're doing, and it's part of the TPA as well. So it's a really strong connection. And we'll be doing that with the cycle 2 with our literacy. And then our lesson plan design. So this is our lesson plan design that I have with our PK3. And again, you can click on it later, but it really is close to, not exactly the same, but very close to the TPA and what the TPA is looking for. So they're familiar with that. When they come in and they have to do the TPA lesson plan, they're like, we've been doing this. This is easy. And I use it as the TPA is our show what you know, because they're already doing all of these things in their classroom. They already are teaching the way that good teachers teach. Now they're just learning how to write it all up and show it. And so It's been just, I don't know, I just can't say enough good things about how it's helped guide our program.
Perfect. We did get one completer to chime in on their experience with the TPA. If you think we cherry picked this one quote, I guess we kind of did because it was the one response we got. So, would it be helpful to read it? Can you see it okay? Is it all right? Of course.
There's 2 pages to it.
Yeah. Extensive, yep. And Tristan, if you're watching, thank you. Let me know when you're ready, because there is a second page.
I'm sorry, Alan, I can't see that. I'm in the home right here. I'm legally blind.
We will share the slide deck around and post it to this agenda item.
Thank you.
It's a little long because we used Tristan's exact words. And if you notice the last paragraph, he had some suggestions that he offered.
So again, I just want to talk about some of the benefits that I've seen around the TPA. You know, I'll admit, being an intern program, we sometimes feel like the little brother or sister to the IHEs. So I know the accreditation process is the same for all programs across the state, but having this tool that's apples to apples, where we could really show off, you know, a program that we're proud of and we think is rigorous and really preparing our teachers, I think is a great thing. So I am a big fan of that. It really does give us that validation that we're producing candidates that are meeting the TPEs, because if you look at how many TPEs are assessed in these cycles, there's a lot. And, you know, it does help prep them for induction. We've heard that in a lot of these meetings, right? It does kind of lean into that IDP. It does get them ready for that inquiry cycle. And I heard it talked about a little bit as well, kind of the common language, that unified framework. If you haven't seen the glossaries in the TPA, I mean, they're pretty great. There's a lot of good stuff in there, and it's a great way for us to get on the same page with our supervisors and our interns to have kind of the common language and that common focus. And I think that helps throughout the whole field, right? Special educator, I know UDL, as soon as that kind of got into the TPA rubrics, you know, it really does kind of force it out into the field at a greater speed, which is a very, very good thing. And while we have all our TPEs, which is a lot of the what we have to do in our programs, the TPA does kind of unify the how it could look, how it should look for our, you know, candidates. So Andrea will talk about maybe some of the challenges.
So the intern program, the placements can be challenging. And I think we heard that before, especially with our ed specialists that are at a high school level single subject. That can be a challenging aspect. And we really do have to work with them at times when we're looking at, you know, maybe the new LPA if they're a math teacher, or getting into doing the math cycle if they're only teaching history. You know, how are we going to integrate that? So those are some challenges that we do see. The requirements at times, we want it to be natural. Sometimes it's not as natural depending on their setting. So, you know, we want an authentic TPA that comes out that's job embedded in what they're doing. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult when we're looking at it. traditional programs, and we were thinking holistically, traditional programs, sometimes they only have like a semester for student teaching. So maybe some of the IAGs or other programs, they only are able to do 2 cycles in one semester. And if you think about that, that's about 20 weeks of time. And I'm spending 9 weeks going over just the first cycle really carefully with them. So that can be challenging in a traditional program for student teaching. Sometimes I guest lecture at some of our Cal States, and I've talked about that with some of the candidates directly and how they find that a little bit difficult at times to do all of it at once. And that's where that stress comes in them, is they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to get 2 of these cycles done in 20 weeks time. I'm only going to spend like 3 weeks on cycle 1, because that cycle 2, it's a lot bigger. There's a lot more to it. So that, I think, from what I've heard in the field, where some of the stress lies. We've talked about ways, like I've even talked with some of my Cal State friends. Do you move the cycle 1 into maybe their observations, not when they're student teaching, but when they're observing a 5-to-1 lesson, they get to know that classroom. Are we going to place it somewhere else? So just talking with them about where they're placing it, and then maybe focusing the student teaching on cycle 2, or as I heard some of you say, moving the cycle 2 into induction, that cycle 2 is a formative assessment. It does lend well at times with inquiry cycles. There are lots of options and considerations that you can make for looking at where the best placement is. And then something that we would like to see, just it's our own little area, we would love to be able to use the TPA in the accreditation process for some of our IPs and As, because we do a lot of our work in the clinical practice where it's done. And it would be great to have that consideration of, we're showing the performance. We're showing that it's assessed here through the TPA as well. So just a thought out there.
If those templates could maybe be pre-filled with those A's and in those many TPEs, that would be nice.
That's what we have on our presentation. We tried to be really honest and transparent and give you everything that we have. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have about it.
Go ahead, Patricia.
I used to work for county office. So your county office is in Selpa, or do you serve many different school districts?
Yeah, we serve Riverside, San Bernardino, Inyo, and Mono. So there's a bunch of different Selpas we partner.
Okay, coming to you. So that's what I thought, but I just wanted to kind of ask that. And then what is the cost to interns? I know sometimes, like what I understand, like the district charges, like I guess in my school district, they charge interns a fee for doing business, I guess, but I don't know what that looks like. Or
Yeah, we don't do that in terms of for like their site mentors or offsetting some of those costs. They just pay tuition, and then we work with the districts through our MOUs for the site mentors.
for the 4 semesters.
Mhm.
And what does tuition look like for you guys?
Currently, right now, it's $2,650 a semester.
To 2,000. Okay, so about 10,000 per program. And that is just they pay out of pocket, or?
Well, we look for any grants that we can find, to be honest with you. So right now, the PK3, we're partnering with the ECE department and having the EETDG grant help cover the entire program for them right now. So there's nothing out of pocket for them. We were using the Golden State, but we're sad. We cannot right now.
They're listening. We love you.
But we look for any opportunities that we can. We have the C2 CT grant. So the classified employees going to certificated, we use that for a lot of our special ed instructional assistants that are coming over. So.
2 more quick questions. One is, so your 5-week coursework that you have now, are the teachers in that 5-week intern, are they still teaching full time, or do they have someone covering their class? No, okay. Because I've been kind of towards like, how can we get districts to help give more paid support? And I know it's very systems oriented. And then the last kind of weird question I have is 165 hours that they need to have. How is that monitored, or how do they demonstrate they've done it, or what counts as it?
Yeah, it's 9 courses with some additional field work that they do. We have 3 different levels. The first level is mostly asynchronous, so they could kind of dive into it, dip their toe, because some are a little more comfortable going back to school than others. And then the last 2 are instructor led, and it's 100% online.
Hey, Julia.
So, thank you so much for your presentation. Andrea, you talked about, they have lots of opportunities to do kind of these tasks ahead of time. And you said it when they're finally doing it, it's the show what they know. So that just sounded to me, we've heard from or seen in other data about candidates talking about how the TPA is very duplicative of what they've already done. And so it's just like an extra task that why should I have to do this? Do you feel like candidates share that? Am I making any sense?
I asked them that. So that was just a conversation we had last week with them because they're in the math course right now. They're doing the math portion of the TPA. So I asked them, is this applicable to what you're doing in your job right now at your site? Not extra work, but work that's supporting what you're doing. And the answer was yes with that. So designing it that way, I think having the course at the same time while they're doing it, they're learning it and it's being embedded. That has been the benefit of that part of the design. And again, that kind of was an idea that came from the CTC when they were talking about in the field test of how to structure it, was having it happen while they were doing it. So I redesigned my whole course sequence that I had to do this. And it really is, I think, working, and the teachers are seeing that it's not busy work. It is really what they're doing on a daily basis.
Anyone else?
You just want our forms. I know that's what you're saying.
You see your early childhood going towards like early childhood special ed. See maybe the bridge coming. I'm just curious. I know it just started.
So let me just start by saying that's very dependent on the vision of our county superintendent.
Are you getting elected this year?
And Dr. Gomez, our county superintendent did support us in starting this. And so if that is an initiative that he would look for in the future, we would be happy to do that. But right now we are so proud to have this and to have started this area.
It's a great start.
Linda.
I'm not sure if you would have this data, but since you are credentialing a lot of teachers, do you have data on how many of them stay into teaching? Do you have data on how the schools, because you're not a university,
We actually have one of the most comprehensive studies available. So most of our candidates matriculate into our induction program, and our induction program partners with UC Riverside, who just conducted a national level study. And at the national level, looking 5 years out, there's a 70% retention rate of teachers, whereas those who complete our program are retained at a level of 97%.
Vanessa.
Your program solely serves interns, correct? So it's only a 2-year program, and many other programs are 1-year programs. Do you see how you structure it being able to fit into a 1-year program?
No, we actually get candidates from a lot of other institutions, and we don't provide them with credit for their coursework, but they still want to come to us because they want this experience because they believe they get support. So it's anecdotal data, but I don't know if you'd like to add anything.
I'll just add, in the ed specialist world, the TPA came in kind of at the same time as the new TPEs. And there are a lot of TPEs because we have to do, the universals and the special ed side. So if someone could figure out how to do that in 1 year, I'd love to see it, but it's just not enough hours in the day.
Similar to what you were saying in that following students afterwards, are you able to see how many stay in Riverside?
We can see that data, but I don't have it available at this moment. I'd have to communicate with UCR to have them disaggregate that in that manner.
Just wonder, it seems like
it's a little bit more complex because our ed specialist program is small and it serves RIMS, which is Riverside, Inyo, Mono, San Bernardino. Our induction program is massive. We serve almost 4,000 candidates on all 7 continents across the world. So to ask about Riverside in particular is really at the micro level.
But working in the induction part of it, when we worked with individual districts, their retention rate of our teachers that went through the induction program, talking with them, was very high. So that was, you know, a nice thing to see as a program manager in induction, that they make that connection within the district. They're staying in their spots.
And they probably, most of the time, they were interns and then into induction. Most of the time.
And that's why Andrea was mentioning like the possibility of considering maybe, I don't know, in some fashion, integrating the TPAs across the spectrum. Because there is a connection between those things that we haven't yet considered.
Thank you for your presentation, and I'm really just sitting here and thinking how different it is to hear from an intern program that talks about how supportive the candidates are and the integration of the TPA and how that's really a part of their teaching and their learning. And I just look at this and think this model something to really be studied. And I wonder, so the more support new teachers can get in learning their practice, the better. And what's the economics of a 2-year program for intern candidates versus a 1-year program, and then they go and are teacher of record? Well, they're still teacher of record, but they're not in an intern program anymore. What's the difference?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we try and be very mindful of our intern circumstances, and they are, you know, earning a beginning teacher salary, which we know is not buying them any Maseratis, but you know, we do try and break it into monthly payments for them. We don't do like lump tuitions or anything like that, since we aren't as a county office eligible for, like, you know, a lot of the federal financial aids. So it does kind of become like a car payment for them that they do each month. And, you know, spreading it out over the 2 years, you know, hopefully they're still employed that whole time, and they just kind of make it work.
And it ends up breaking down to be about somewhere between 360 and
Yeah.
80 a month, I believe.
Yeah, it can go, they've got a couple different options. So it could, you know, go close to 400, or if they want to do bigger payments, they could put it out.
They're earning a new teacher's salary, whether they're in the intern program or whether they're on an emergency credential, that salary is the same.
Depends on the district. Some districts do have different salary schedules around that. And our units do count for salary advancement too. So some of them will take it as they go. So that does help.
And we also partner with various universities. So if they're interested in obtaining a master's degree, for example, some of the universities that we have MOUs with will accept those credits and apply them for a master's degree. We're not an institute that offers anything beyond credentials. So.
And then I guess also my final sort of related question to this is the way you described the integration of the performance assessment process and the ways in which you and your students have indicated its value. Would you sort of compare if you were doing this in 2 years like you are versus if you had to do it in 1 year?
Yeah, great question. I think, well, I've got a good example. We did start with a 3-semester program, 18 months, and it was too tight. The feedback was it was too tight. And we did include that extra semester just to give some breathing room. And the feedback from both the interns and the supervisors have been unanimous. They needed that. As we talked about, the interns are just so busy. Their day jobs are off the charts. So they actually appreciated the more time and space.
Do you think they appreciated the time and space just because they needed to complete a performance assessment, or did they appreciate the time and space to learn to teach?
I think it was the support of their supervisor, their time with their cohort mates, and the feedback and the chance to I think, more deeply engage with the coursework, right? They were able, I think, to dive into it at a deeper level with that extra time.
I was just thinking too, and hearing you talk, Tina, like being in the school, there's lots of other stuff you don't think about. Like parent-teacher conferences threw me off because half my day is gone. I can't serve students. I have to find out how to make. Red Ribbon Week just happened. You have Halloween, you have Thanksgiving, you have Day of the Dead. There's all these other things that schools are doing. Crazy Karen comes to campus and so I think that also accounts for those little times that week before Christmas break where teachers are trying to get their grades in, trying to get report cards in. So I think that extra time people don't think about sometimes because you're not in that school setting. You're like with the students. And
when you meet with the interns, you hear all of that. So you can even adjust, we can even adjust weekly, like what we're doing.
IEPs, right? Like, you know, IEP, like October is a big month. I bet like these months that are like IEPs that we have to get done.
And another thing to consider, I'll add, is since they are 2 years in their own classroom teacher of record, it can qualify them for ECO for induction. So it could end up being a 3-year process for them, you know, in the end anyhow. Again, it would depend on the district and their evaluations and all that stuff, but we do have a lot who do qualify for ECO in induction by the end.
I'm sorry, real quick. The supervisor is the principal, or who is the supervisor for the candidate?
So there are our intern supervisors are our TCMEs, our temporary contract management employees that we train and we meet every month and calibrate. They also have a site mentor that's assigned by the district that, again, we meet with and train, and we even have a site mentor ILP that they do and work on for those 10 hours throughout the year. And we do have a whole section on the TPA for them to reference.
Linda? Oh, okay. So similar to what we've asked all the other institutes, it sounds great that you guys are embedding a lot of the TPAs into your coursework and really driving it, even wanting it to be a part of accreditation. So my question is, if there was no ed TPA, just on the other side, or if it wasn't a factor, how would that affect your program?
Yeah, I heard some universities talk about it. We had a portfolio before that we still have elements of, and I think we would go back to that. And, you know, that while we hope for portfolios to be authentic, it can feel, I mean, talk about duplicative, right? Like take the thing you did like 3 months ago and upload it somewhere else. So, you know, it's those challenges I think would be the same. But yeah, we would probably replace it with that.
Do you think the ed TPA or the TPA, it's ed TPA.
Cal TPA.
Cal TPA, I apologize. Do you think that having the Cal TPA has made your program more rigorous?
I mean, I'd like to think we had a rigorous program all along the way, but yeah, I do. I do think it is. Yeah.
And I think if you took it away, I would still use it. Like if you all decided you did, I would still want to do it because it's a tool that we're using to help in our classroom and what we're doing. So I would still want that aspect in there because I do think that as a tool, it really helps, and it helps with clarity. It helps with guidance. And so I view it as very valuable, and I would like you not to take it away, please.
Kathy?
I'm just really struck by how, the structure for a county office of ed and, versus say an IHE, the amount of nimbleness you have.
And that was my motivation for going to the county office. We don't have the bureaucracy, and honestly, like people don't really, they allow me the autonomy that we need to be able to be flexible in real time.
Yeah, the focus can really be on certain types of alignment that you don't necessarily have the room to do in an IHE type of situation. And so I'm just really struck by that. And I'm just, thinking about all the suggestions that we're making and trying to figure out ways that we can make some suggestions that could help kind of break down some of that nonsense. I still want my job at USC.
I was just gonna call out ECO. I saw a couple people looking at each other quizzically.
Oh.
It's early completion option, meaning you can take a 2-year program down to a 1-year program. You can also do that for internship based on ed code, but not for certain credential areas such as SPED. So like a multiple subject or single subject credential. Technically, there's by ed code an ECO option where a 2-year internship becomes. As soon as they show that they met the criteria.
And CTC, you're busy. Don't worry about bringing that to ed specialists. We're good.
Vanessa.
I appreciate your approach in showing what you know and demonstrating mastery and not making it an additional burden. But I also recognize that interns are classroom teachers, and so our pre-service teachers are the pathways that are not interns don't have that connection, that real world connection. So I'm trying to figure out how to apply your strategies to the larger scope, because our credential candidates that don't have that don't see the relevance in the bigger structure.
And that's why when talking with some of the colleagues that I had at some of the Cal States, you know, we really did talk about, do you have to have both cycles happen during student teaching? I'm like, can't you move another cycle to the observation portion when they're in that classroom for several weeks and start working on that? And they were like, maybe we could. So I mean, there are different ways to think about it without changing the IHE's programs, because they're excellent programs that they're going through. Maybe just looking at how we're putting it.
All right, on behalf of the committee, we thank you very much for your presentation and for being here today. Great to hear from a different program structure too. With that, we will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to make a comment, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or by clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Recording secretary, do we have any public comments?
Mara Harvey. Please unmute your microphone.
Hello. Okay. I think that I am. Let me start my video. Okay. I think you guys start the timer, right? So that I know I won't be 2 minutes. So my name is Mara Harvey. I'm the president of the Natomas Teachers Association. I've been a teacher in Natomas in Sacramento for about 10 years. And in that time, I have had student teachers, worked with intern teachers, and also see that I think one of the people I knew as a student teacher is actually on this commission. So I just wanted to come and speak a little bit to what I see as a person who works with teachers on a regular basis and supporting teachers on a regular basis. In the conversation that you guys had about intern teachers, I want to remind everybody that intern teachers are full-time teachers with all the same contractual obligations as every other teacher that works on a campus. I heard somebody mention earlier, you know, there's parent-teacher conferences, they have the non-instructional service duty, they have the duty before and after school, they have all of the same obligations. And so what I see happen is that this process of finishing the Cal TPA on top of everything else becomes an incredible stress on them. In my leadership in 4 years, we've lost about 3 teachers who were just unable to handle balancing all of the work that was involved in the TPA, along with the concerns about pay and how they could afford it. So one teacher in particular had to continue their enrollment at the university that they were enrolled in because they failed a portion of the TPA, and that was thousands of dollars to add another semester. And on top of that, they also had to pay to retake the portion of the tests or the portion of the work that they were doing. So I'm just here to advocate for changes. I would love to see the elimination of it. With all of the years and experience I have in the classroom, I just see that there's a lot of other ways to support our new teachers. So thank you.
Ms. Beth Pearson?
Over here. Hi, my name is Mishka Pearson, and I am a teacher in the Elk Grove Unified School District. I teach transitional kindergarten this year, and I'm currently housing my second resident teacher. So my district and County Office of Education have decided to use resident teachers to fill our paraeducator shortage. So my residents are working as my paraeducator, and they are employed by the district, and they're in a residency program. So she's with me all year long. Her only experience will be in TK, and then all of her other coursework time while she's on campus, not working with students, she's just observing in other classrooms. So she will not have another experience outside of TK. So I have been teaching for 25 years. I did not know anything about the TPA until I was on a committee at CTA, and then I learned about it, and then I got a resident, and now I have another resident. So as a teacher who's been teaching for a very long time, my experience with the TPA is very limited, except I was obviously thrown in last year knowing nothing about it and trying to support a resident who was losing her mind as to what she is trying to do for her residency program and her TPAs. And she had to complete both rounds of TPA in the spring, which was problematic for her. It was a lot to do along with all of her observations and being in the classroom, working as a paraeducator at that time, which is problematic in itself. She's working as a para, but also a student teacher. So it's problematic. I would echo what Mara said, is that I don't feel that this is an authentic way or the only authentic way to prepare our teachers. I think they're under a lot of stress already. It's just another layer of stress for them is what I'm hearing in our experience in the classroom.
Thank you.
Mother. All right, so looking at the schedule, it is now time for us to move to our work group members. Any questions or comments that you have? I'd really like to make sure that we capture anything that our members who are leaving might have to say before we break for lunch.
I was kind of struck by, thinking about the structure of the TPA and how it's not necessarily compatible with certain types of contexts. This last comment was a perfect example of that. And what we can do possibly to make some suggestions on how we can either break things out or structure things in a certain way or an accreditation to make sure that candidates are not being overly burdened at certain points in their religion. No matter what, type of, whether they're LEAs or whether they're at IHEs, but just trying to make sure that there's something built in to ensure that the candidates are not being overly burdened at certain times, because it seems kind of crazy for candidates to be put in that situation. And I think that can totally be avoided.
Go with Kathy was saying, and I also, after hearing everyone's presentations, I have positive intent of developing a program that meets all the needs of each of their candidates to pass the TPA with some things, hearing things that could use some help, but everyone is basically teaching to the test at this point. And what recommendations then to give to actually make some change when we have 3 different models across different classroom settings, which recommend, like, where do we go when initially our thoughts were, oh, well, let's give them an orientation and let's do these other things. But what we're hearing, the programs are doing that already. And where's the what Christy was saying yesterday, where's the for candidates where it's burdensome and
Yeah.
It's just a follow-up to that. I feel like the programs that we heard from, I don't
it's a good thing. A lot of them shared their, well, I don't know that we saw the data from all, but in a lot of cases, they are highly successful programs. So these are successful practices. So how can we replicate some of these models or recommend the replication of some of these models with other programs?
Linda?
Thank you, Vanessa, for saying that, but teaching to the test, because I was thinking a lot of these institutes, like we talked about embedding, they're embedding, but it's with the assumption that the TPA itself is what teaching is and what's successful for the classroom. You know what I mean? And so the focus of all these institutes is the TPA. I don't know if that's the necessary, should be the focus. Like it should be the focus is the schools in the area that they're going to become teachers to, not the TPA itself. And also there was a comment that was made by National University that I was kind of like, whoa. Not that it was a horrible comment, but she was making comment like, oh, well, the district supervisors and the way should train district people on the TPAs and how it looks and the language of the TPA, because our teacher interns are getting advice from coaches and mentors who have never seen the Cal TPA. And my thought to that is, well, first of all, these are real teachers who are giving advice. That's real advice. Like their advice should trumpet what's on Cal TPAs, because this is real. They're the real experts in the field who are helping their student teachers or intern teachers. So if their language is not matching Cal TPA, that's Cal TPA's problem, not the teacher's problem. Like, I don't know, that's how I feel about this. So then in that case, I'm thinking, is the TPA aligned with what's really happening in the classrooms? And can we say that because you pass the TPAs, you're going to be a fabulous teacher in the classroom? So that's where I'm concerned.
Good.
I was just, so some of the things I've heard over the stretch with this committee has given me a lot of hope / good solid thought, because there's a lot of very intelligent people within this room talking about teacher practices that know teacher practices. And one of the things that struck me yesterday, so it was actually mentioned by Pearson a while ago about this whole idea of taking the mini models of like a TPA and chunking it. And I do think some of the overwhelmed high stakesness of it, because every program is going to be embedding it the way that has been kind of shared, right? Hey, we're going to take some of these, we're going to embed them within the coursework. They're going to get a chance to do it with coursework with feedback. But on the high stakes one, it's going to duplicate that effort. It has to, right? Because that's the only way you make it formative. And so they'll duplicate that and may not have feedback as much from like faculty, but from peers, that's okay, right? But Tina made a comment yesterday, and I think it was echoed a few times around about like, the continuum. And can you imagine if we could break up? Because my question is like, what really is it that stresses the candidates out? What is it that is that? And it's the idea that, if I were formulating my thought, it's the idea that, from my point of view, someone is maybe grappling with 40 pages of writing and multiple, depending on the cycle and depending on multiple video observations where they're doing authentic things that are quality for teachers, right? Like a good example, like for Cal TPA, which is the one I'm familiar with, they're going to talk about learning targets. Well, that's a very high leverage strategy that needs to be within a classroom setting. But the thing is, they have to do that with 2 other things within a 5-minute time span for it to qualify. So there's an unnatural feel to this natural and meaningful product, right? But like when you think about the capacity of chunking something down and taking elements of something that are best practices and emulating that would address the 55 condition codes for one assessment. That would address the trying to fit something and making it feel like something that doesn't feel authentic. I mean, these are all best practices they're doing. The part that I've heard from candidates that feels less authentic is doing it within a time frame without an edit, right? Like, and fitting it within this box, kind of, right? So to me, more than anything, I'm coming away with a little bit of hope. Like, I really like the whole 5-week time span of like, we're going to put a pause on all courses. That is something that balances that overwhelming feeling that our program does not currently do. And that's like great food for thought if I could figure out how to navigate the coursework in such a way, but we get that in a bonus. So to me, that's kind of what I wanted to call out is like, I'm starting to, at least in my mind, compartmentalize some themes that I think could be really, really useful for recommendations, because I would wager most people, if they look at the test, see the the real life things that are useful for teaching in it. So then the question becomes, okay, if we're looking at practical application, how do we do this in a way that doesn't overwhelm folks, where we can chunk things out and where it's not becoming like a 40-page turn in one time? How do we chunk it out maybe a little bit more? I don't know.
Yeah, the operationalize it. How do you operationalize it so that it actually makes sense and it is truly authentic and is truly doing what you need it to do?
Right.
Because right now, there's a big variety of how it fits.
Right.
In various programs and types of preparation. And, I think, when you say, Linda, talking about teaching to the test, the way I try and think about it is if we want them to do authentic things that they are going to be doing in their practice, and we want to give them formative feedback, they have to do the types of tasks that are in that test. I don't know if I would necessarily call it teaching to the test. I would call it preparing. But again, that looks different across different programs and different training contexts. And you are so right. We got to figure out a way to operationalize it so that it does make sense in these wide varieties of settings and things.
Rebecca.
Now I'm starting to think this is just too simple and obvious to everybody else but me. But I don't know, Kathy, when you were talking a minute ago, it just like we've heard UDL brought up a couple times about how we want our new teachers prepared to understand and utilize universal design. If we talk about firm goals and flexible means, we have our firm goals, that's the TP. So is there a way to approach a common or assessment that is flexible, that embraces the principles of universal design so that we can provide access to the people that we want to bring to our class?
Devin.
Thank you. There's a lot going on in my head, and I don't know if it's probably because I'm getting hangry. But I wanted to kind of backtrack and piggyback off of, I think it was Linda's comments. First, as a TPA coordinator and someone who has also put a lot of time and effort into integrating the TPA into coursework and clinical practice and making significant changes at my institution to support the needs of our teacher candidates so they're successful in their TPAs. I mean, first, I applaud the work that has been done and discussed today. I mean, there's a lot. Stepping aside from my professional role and looking at this objectively, as I listen to some of the presentations and hear about the institution's efforts to embed TPAs in their coursework and clinical practice, it's a lot. There's a lot going on. A lot of things have been done. Of course, it's good stuff to support credential candidates and prepare teachers, but I also think it's a lot to go through simply to help candidates, what I think is being successful on an assessment. Realistically, I don't think the things that have been done or discussed would have been done or necessary if it wasn't for the current design of the TPA. I mean, all of the work done by institutions, I believe, is indicative of the need to make some adjustments or changes to the current TPA. You know, first, we want to recognize the needs of adult learners. They're taking classes, they're working, student teaching, balancing family responsibility, financial stress, and our institutions are starting to add more expectations, more class time, more responsibilities, requiring more meetings with instructors and supervisors and mentors. And it's all really designed just to help them be successful on the TPA. And not recognizing how this contributes to additional stress, anxiety, and worry, and just be problematic. And I think, unfortunately, it's spun in a way to suggest that the purpose is to make them better teachers, when realistically it's to help them pass a test. And I'm not sure if anyone else is feeling this way. Like I said, I'm probably just hangry, but considering the discussions that took place yesterday, the presentations and discussions today, I'm getting the feeling that it's all really just a deliberate effort to convince us that the TPAs are perfect, to try to validate the effectiveness of the TPAs and justify keeping them as they are, and putting all the effort and responsibilities to support credential candidates and, pass the TPAs on institutions. And realistically, it's making me feel a little pessimistic on the acceptance of recommendations that this work group makes. We're here because the TPA has been called into question, not only the support that's being provided by institutions. And so this work group was created to review the design and implementation of teacher performance assessments. And I'm not advocating for the elimination of TPAs. I do believe they're needed, but I also think they should be revised as well. Not only because it's job security for me, but I do think they need to be revised. But I do feel like that this is an effort to protect the TPAs. And I get it. When I've created curriculum or a new course or a new assignment, I believe that they're effective. And when they're calling a question, it makes me a little bothered, makes me a little uncomfortable. I want to push back. And so I'm just suggesting that those who benefit or even profit from the TPAs be more open-minded. I mean, I think the focus is really to revise both the TPA and the support provided within institutions.
Ursula?
So I'm thinking, I love what Ben said about those smaller chunks. And I think as I reflect on the entire teacher development process and that thought of smaller chunks, I like that thought. I also like the thought of everybody here is familiar with adult learning, right? And what is one of the premises or pillars of adult learning theory is choice. Yet we don't give any choice. You got to complete these cycles. And guess what? You're a traditional candidate. You've got a limited amount of time to do it. And if you have to redo it, there's no grace. So I can imagine something that's smaller in scope with some choice for the candidate that spans the entire process, not just the preliminary phase, but maybe even into the induction phase.
One of the things that drew my attention today, and maybe because I'm coming from the district's perspective, was that concern that we need to have more of a connection between IHEs and districts. And I guess I just was thinking about a couple of things. As I have developed several evaluation programs, just remembering that those are grounded in the CSTPs. And I think it might be beneficial for us to just take a look at some evaluations to consider what are teachers in the field actually being evaluated on versus what is actually in the TPA. I think that might be valuable to look at the two. And I know it's going to be vastly different across the state of California, but I think it might be relevant to our conversations because I don't think it looks like the TPA once they're in a classroom, or even in the middle piece, which is the induction program, right? And I think it might be meaningful. We hadn't talked about this before, but it might be good to look at what's being taught and assessed in the induction piece and how all three of those pieces are playing together. I'm not sure it's realistic for us to ask districts to change to meet the TPA, although I did hear someone saying that that would be a request today. But just trying to figure out, in my mind, how all those three play together. Because once they're in the district, they never go back to that early program. So those are just questions. And my other one, I just want to echo Juliet. I really am curious, how are low pass rate programs, how are they structured? How do they look in comparison to what we looked at today? I think that information would be incredibly valuable because we might be able to find weaknesses that need support or growth, and we might be able to tailor some of those recommendations to that. But at this point, I feel like it's information we just don't have. And I think it would be valuable. Ursula?
One other thought. Like I said, I love that idea of smaller chunks. I love the idea of spanning it, as you mentioned, connecting it to the current new CSTPs and adding something to the accreditation process. Because I feel like part of the reason why we're here is because there really isn't any, there aren't any teeth in the accreditation process. And so I think we need to address that as well.
Elaborate what, I don't understand what that means.
So, for example, in the current accreditation process, which I look forward to hearing about at our next meeting, really don't ask them Yes, so for all of our programs, for any program that exists, they undergo the accreditation process, and that happens every 7 years. It starts at the 6th year where you begin to submit your evidence and whatnot. And then they come out, in the past, pre-COVID, they came out for a face-to-face visit. As it stands, it's on Zoom, I think, but now, and I understand that it's going to shift back to face-to-face. But all of that to say that we do not ask the institutions for any evidence of the degree to which they provide. We do ask questions about the degree to which they support their candidates, but we don't triangulate that to their evidence.
Tina?
Really appreciating this conversation and the ideas of choice and flexibility. And I love the idea of looking at assessments as they're an in-service, because all of these pieces that come together are really important for preparation. I think one of the things that the TPA has provided our field as a tool when we talk about support providers, whether they're in schools or IHEs, is we talked about this before, having a common language to talk about practice to support candidates. And I think one of the most valuable things about that is that for a very, very long time in teacher education, still do this. The way we prepare teachers is we take this very difficult profession, it's very difficult task of teaching, and we break it down into different pieces and courses in order to teach specific things to beginning professionals so that they can learn what those things are, whether it be supporting students with special needs, whether it be, learning the pedagogy of the discipline, et cetera. And then in large part, we require them to put it all together in their practice without oftentimes enough support of putting it back together in a holistic way in practice. And I think that's one thing that early on the TPAs brought to us. It was a performance assessment that emulated the whole practice of teaching and required the teacher candidates to pull it all together and demonstrate that they could do so. And if we use this tool for people in schools, for people in IHEs, for people from all different places in the education stream, to look at practice and be able to talk about it in a coherent way with one another and with new teachers. And the more we do that, the better our profession gets.
It's come to my attention that there were technical difficulties a little bit earlier, and there was a member of the public that was here to speak and didn't have the opportunity to hear from them because of that. So we'd like to reopen the floor for public comment. And we have Clara here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, I was not able to speak yesterday. I was shut down on both video and microphone. So thank you for this opportunity. I came in just a little bit later on today because I had other meetings, but I wanted to just speak as the director of the Master of Bilingual Education with a bilingual authorization for National University statewide, as well as the president. I'm the current president of the California Association of Bilingual Teacher Preparation, Bilingual Teacher Education. So I'm not sure if there have been any discussions that I have missed this morning or yesterday about the preparation of bilingual teachers and or the usage of the California TPA as we currently have it for our bilingual, multilingual candidates. I don't know, and I'm not familiarized with any efforts to disaggregate data in terms of how our bilingual, multilingual teachers are faring in terms of their completion of the California TPA. We know the California TPA is meeting and responding to the TPEs for the state of California, but the California TPA does not concern itself with the bilingual teaching performance expectations, which have to be assessed separately. So I just wanted to bring up this point to the conversation, because in the space that we are talking and discussing the equity issues around a performance assessment that is one size fits all for all of our candidates, we may have a differential outcome result for those that are multilingual and bilingual teachers. I understand that there have been accommodations made for the submission of video footage as well in the language of instruction, which could be any one of, 20, 30 different languages. But I'm still unclear as to what is the future of the state of California in the area of assessing both the TPEs and the BTPs for our multilingual bilingual teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Taking a quick little pause. Anyone else today? Okay, with that, before we take our lunch break, I just want to recount. So because I'm thinking we're at 12, and if we are, I think we may need to go to recess this meeting. So I just want to check. I don't want to go to lunch and then come back and find out that we're down to 12. So if you will just raise your hand if you are not going to be joining us if we come back at 1:45.
Not joining you.
And we've already lost Kate, right?
Yeah, then we will not have a quorum.
We will not have a quorum. Yep. Okay. So
Stay.
oh,
Kathy stayed down.
So if you left, we would move adding brainstorming for recommendations to the first day of our next meeting. If you stay, then we'll continue brainstorming recommendations.
I guess how long would that take?
It'll go till 3. Yeah.
Same brainstorm recommendations.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't
That's true too. That's true.
Ending at 3, we're coming back at 1:45, 2 o'clock. That's an hour to brainstorm everything, seeing people.
So,
yeah. Madam Chair, if it pleases the chairs, we've also designed an interim homework assignment, which research shows is effective for adult learners. To add the opportunity of some processing, and I'll send it to the work group emails as well as private emails so that there's no.
Everyone gets it.
All right.
Okay, so we'll move with that item 3B to our next agenda plus homework to get you to start thinking about further recommendations. I want to draw your attention and make sure everyone received the handout 4A, which was the initial recommendation scores. Thank you for taking the time to do that survey last night. Just please review that as you go through and start to do the homework of thinking about additional things or thinking about how things can be combined in recommendations. And then also what focus area they belong in, right? Of our 5 focus areas. And with that, let's take 5 minutes and just see if our staff or anyone has any closing remarks for today.
I just have a question. Were you gonna theme those at 4A handout yet, or was that gonna be?
That was gonna be in our 3B conversation. Yeah. Question.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful of time to have somebody do a preliminary sorting of those. And then we can always adjust that.
Say that I thank you for being here and for providing such rich discussion. Adam and I share a love for the dialectic. That, sometimes we get a little strained in that dialectic, but that's what it's for, is to stretch your thinking and push your thinking. And I feel stretched, pushed, and optimistic if I just compartmentalize to what we're doing here today. So, and thank you all for taking the time to be here. This was not the easiest time to be here, and I know it took some extra effort. So thank you for that. Thank you for your continued work. Continue to be brave and bold, and thank you.
Anna?
I thank you to our presenters who came and, you know, with these three seemingly simple questions kind of illustrated a very complex world. And I'm really interested and thrilled to hear, you know, to hear members cautioning us to remember each part of the review of the design and implementation of the TPA. And then, you know, I also just love how the recommendations are sort of in this notion of the continuum and embedding. It's all kind of something bigger is being created with your thinking in this exchange. And I think today for me, more than at any other time, it seems like you all are peering into some really exciting opportunities for what could be in a continuum for candidates. I'm just honored to be part of this and happy to keep sending you emails.
And Danette Brown.
I just want to echo what Adam and Mary, I could not have said it better. I just want to continue everyone to take care of themselves, be safe, and hopefully I'll see you in person in December. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you. All right. So with that, we will now adjourn the November 2024 RDI TPA work group. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 4th and 5th. Adam will send emails both to your personal and to your CTC. Just be on the outlook for those. We'll spend a significant amount of time reviewing those recommendations, adding to it next time. I think today we spent a lot of time listening, and I'm definitely hearing that we need some more time to discuss. So we're going to set aside a significant amount of time to do that next time, and have fewer presentations so that you have time to really share your thoughts and really work and draft more recommendations. All right. Thank you all for being here today. Please travel safely, present well. We send you good thoughts.
Yep, I will. Yeah, I'm happy to just put your name tags in your binder.